This remarkable manhwa begins on a dark, stormy night in an ancient Chinese residence. Several men dressed in black robes stand in a line. Someone asks if anyone is present. Rain has pooled into a puddle from the endless downpour. A filthy child stands in the rain, facing the men in black robes. Their stillness is disconcerting. A man with crimson eyes observes the boy intently, wondering how anyone could be living in the abandoned martial academy. Addressing him as a young warrior, the man politely asks for permission to take shelter from the rain for the night. The boy examines them, curious about who they might be. It surprises him that they are speaking to him so respectfully, despite his young age. He reasons that they might see him as a young Taoist protecting the closed academy. In response, he greets them and thinks that perhaps they aren't dangerous people. He explains that he too only started living in the abandoned academy a few years ago, adding that they may stay wherever they wish, just not in his pavilion. The men thank the young warrior for his generosity. Their leader instructs them to avoid the boy's pavilion and find other spots for shelter. He asks if they understand, and they all respond affirmatively before dispersing to find their own spaces. The boy notices the word Tang embroidered on their robes and wonders if they belong to the same clan. Though curious about their identity, he has more pressing matters to attend to. Entering his pavilion, he busies himself with preparing dinner for the children. The somber atmosphere shifts as the boy becomes animated with joy. Our protagonist enthusiastically calls everyone to eat. Opening a large pot, he reveals a small, brown, cricket-like insect inside, remarking that he was nearly late and the insects must be starving. In another pot, he finds a large spider called the black earth tiger, a tarantula native to Hainan, China. This impressive species, which can grow up to 20 centimeters long, features unique stripes resembling those of a black tiger. Using chopsticks, the boy carefully picks up an insect to feed the spider. While feeding it, he reflects on how he wouldn't have survived without these creatures. The tarantula eagerly eats the insect, pleasing the boy. He marvels at how this spider, once the size of a fingernail, has already shed its shell twice and grown so much. Feeling happy, he notes that the spider has had its fill. Next, the boy opens a drawer to reveal an orange lizard with white stripes, a bewangling cave gecko. This species is native to the region and recognized by its striped body and tail. The boy recalls how difficult it was to acquire such creatures in his previous life when he lacked money. Now he can find them everywhere. His life is filled with joy as he watches over them. While feeding the gecko, it bites his finger. Yelling loudly, he waves his hand to shake it off, but the gecko clings stubbornly. This incident reminds him of his past. Before inhabiting this body, the boy was a streamer named Spicy Fabre, a professional biologist with over 1 million subscribers. His content focused on venomous creatures, and his final live broadcast became his undoing. In a quest to showcase the 10 most dangerous vipers, he embarked on a journey to find the black mamba, known for its aggressive nature. During the live stream, he lamented that he couldn't find the snake and decided to take a break. Viewers joked about the possibility of it being in his house, but to his shock, the black mamba was indeed there, curled up on his refrigerator. Before he could react, it bit him and he died instantly during the broadcast. Returning to the present, the boy pouts, reflecting on the irony of his death after such an exhaustive search. Meanwhile, an elderly man in a black robe knocks on the pavilion door. Thanking the boy for his kindness, he invites him to share their meal, a freshly caught deer. Excited at the prospect of eating proper meat rather than snakes or lizards, the boy eagerly accepts the invitation. The group gathers around a bonfire as the deer cooks. Noticing the boy's intense gaze at the food, the elder reassures him that it will take time to cook. To pass the time, he begins asking the boy questions about his age and living situation. Embarrassed but obliging, the boy answers his inquiries. The boy felt embarrassed when he realized he'd been staring at the deer for too long. Allowing the elder to ask his questions, he listened attentively. The elder wanted to know if the boy lived alone and how old he was. Unsure if he was 14 or 15, the boy decided to fabricate a story, claiming that a childhood head injury had left him with poor memories. When asked if he was staying there by himself, the boy confirmed, explaining that he lacked any real talent and survived by catching snakes and selling their skins. The elder expressed disbelief that the boy engaged in such dangerous work, but the boy simply shrugged, saying he was used to it. Just then, someone brought over some cooked meat for them to eat. An old man commented on how hungry the young warrior must have been. The boy gratefully thanked the elder, happily noting it had been ages since he'd last eaten meat. As he took a bite, pure joy spread across his face. In his mind, he thought this is what happiness feels like. The older men watched him with smiles, their amusement evident. As he ate, the elders took the opportunity to ask more questions. The elder explained that they were searching for something unusual and wanted to know if the boy had seen anything strange. Initially hesitant, the elder eventually decided it was safe to share the details since the boy lived alone and wouldn't cause trouble. The patriarch explained they were looking for a centipede with a blue spot on its body. Surprised, the boy asked how large the centipede was. The patriarch explained that an adult could easily swallow someone his size. Pale with shock, the boy realized his assumption that he'd been transported only a few centuries into the past might be wrong. He could be in an entirely different world. The white-haired elder reassured him, saying they were close to capturing the creature. Curious, the boy asked if they intended to keep it as a pet. The question amused the elders and the white-haired man burst into laughter. The patriarch chuckled, commenting on how funny the young warrior was. Through laughter, the elder clarified that raising the centipede wasn't their goal, they needed it for medicinal purposes. Confused, the boy probed further. Initially suspecting them of being traitors, he began wondering if they were involved in illegal drug making. He asked how a centipede could serve as medicine. The elder explained that his granddaughter was gravely ill, and only the inner core of the blue spot centipede could save her. Moved by their determination, the boy thought about the lengths parents would go to for their children. Though he felt sorry for the centipede, he decided to help them, especially since they had treated him to meat. The boy began discussing the centipede, and the patriarch eagerly asked if he had seen one. He admitted he hadn't but suggested he might know where they could find it. Drawing on his vast knowledge as Spicy Fabre, a former biologist and streamer with expertise in venomous creatures, the boy recalled facts about centipedes. Among the millions of species on Earth, around 20,000 are venomous, and he knew all of them by heart. Centipedes were no exception. In his mind, he visualized opening a book and flipping through its pages, searching for the specific information he needed. Within moments, he closed the book, having found the answer. Back in reality, he told the elders he might know where the centipede could be. Startled but intrigued, they pressed him for details. The boy asked which areas they had already searched. They explained they had explored to the north and east of the academy, primarily along the riverside during the day. Hearing this, the boy wasn't surprised by their lack of success. Smirking, he remarked, "Of course you couldn't find it." The elders, puzzled, demanded an explanation. The boy began to lecture, explaining that centipedes belong to the Arthropoda phylum and the Cultivates class, preparing to share his knowledge of their habits and habitats. Centipedes have a broad range of habitats, and being cold-blooded, they require shelter to regulate their body temperature and maintain humidity levels. Interestingly, unlike most insects with a waterproof outer layer, centipedes have weak waterproofing and pores in their shells, making them averse to wet environments. They thrive in high-humidity areas but avoid waterlogged places, as they can't survive long without moisture but dislike excessively damp conditions. Because of this, the blue spot centipede is unlikely to be found in jungles or near rivers. The elders were skeptical. They believed centipedes preferred environments like cracks and rotting wood. The boy clarified that while smaller centipedes might dwell there, the larger ones they were seeking wouldn't. Big centipedes avoid jungles and riverside rocks since these areas lack sufficient hiding spots. The elders exchanged glances, silently communicating. They then asked the boy where the centipede might be found. Promising a significant reward if he helped, the boy smiled and pointed westward, suggesting they search the Rocky Mountains in that direction. He explained that large centipedes rest under warm rocks during the day and come out at night. A few hours later, the search party scoured the Rocky Mountains. The patriarch climbed a tall, narrow rock, observing the surroundings. One of the men suggested that the young warrior might have been mistaken. The patriarch decided to end the search for the day, signaling the team with an arrow. As the men gathered around a bonfire, they were visibly exhausted but still clung to hope, trusting the boy's intelligence. The patriarch, deep in thought, eventually spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. He lamented that his daughter, Huayun, was the greatest talent in the Tang family's history and questioned why the heavens seemed to abandon her. Suddenly, a voice announced the Grand Patriarch's return. The patriarch welcomed him and they gathered around the fire. The Grand Patriarch confirmed that he too had failed to find the centipede. With Huayun's condition worsening and only a few months left, he doubted they could locate the creature in 10 days. A heavy silence fell. The patriarch suggested exploring the southern region the next day. The Grand Patriarch agreed but added that they hadn't found any traces so far. Hearing this, the patriarch suddenly burst into laughter, realizing something he had overlooked. He exclaimed that they were indeed in the right place. The Grand Patriarch was puzzled and asked if he had seen anything. The patriarch replied no, but the Grand Patriarch elaborated. He explained that the complete absence of traces, no animals, droppings or markings, was a sign that the centipede might have cleared the area. The realization struck the patriarch. Territorial animals might have fled or fallen prey to the centipede. Confident, the Grand Patriarch assured him that the blue spot centipede was definitely nearby. Their hope to save Huayun reignited. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake. Cracks appeared and the bonfire area started to crumble. To their horror, a massive limb emerged from the earth, followed by another. The men froze in terror as the enormous blue spot centipede revealed itself. Even the Grand Patriarch looked unsettled. Back at the academy, the boy grumbled about the chaos. He wondered how massive the centipede must be to cause such a commotion. Being a venomous animal enthusiast, he was both annoyed and curious, wishing he could see the creature himself. At the Rocky Mountains, the battle against the centipede raged on. The men eventually triumphed, though not without sustaining injuries. They successfully retrieved the centipede's core, a shimmering blue gem safely stored in a wooden box. Overcome with emotion, they wept, knowing they could finally save Huayun. The patriarch instructed the Grand Patriarch to lead the injured warriors to Sichuan for treatment. When asked why he wasn't coming, the patriarch explained, "Grudges are carved in blood, but favors are carved in stone. That's the way we live." In summary, they still had matters to resolve. The Grand Patriarch finally understood and admitted how he had nearly made a grave mistake by focusing solely on Huayun. He agreed it would be appropriate to welcome the young warrior as a guest and grant his requests. The patriarch instructed the injured warrior to receive treatment in the village while he went to visit the young warrior. He considered that the young warrior might also be curious about the recent events. Meanwhile, the young warrior was casually enjoying the company of 3 small yellow Pokemon-like creatures. The young warrior found himself in a peculiar situation. He had unexpectedly become the father to 3 blue spot centipedes. These tiny creatures, resembling caterpillars, were undeniably cute, especially as they affectionately rubbed against his face. Looking at the pot, a memory flashed in his mind. When he had brought the eggs home, he cleaned them and placed them on his nightstand. By the time he woke up, they had all hatched. One centipede happily rested on his head. Although the young warrior had anticipated the eggs might hatch, he hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. He tried to remove the centipedes clinging to his shoulders, but they refused to let go, treating him as their parent. A flashback revealed what had transpired the previous night. Driven by curiosity about the massive blue spot centipede, the young warrior had ventured into its lair, despite knowing the risks. During his search, he accidentally kicked an insect in frustration, causing him to lose his balance and drop his torch. Thankfully, the 3 eggs he had collected remained safe. Relieved that the rain had stopped, he realized how lucky he had been to retrieve the eggs without losing them. Determined to protect the eggs, he hurried back home, promising them a proper bath once he arrived. Back in the present, the young warrior felt satisfied that even though he couldn't see the live adult centipede, he had managed to save its offspring. He reminded himself that they wouldn't need food until after their second molting, but it was a challenge dealing with them constantly clinging to his body. Thinking of a solution, he smirked and decided to take a shower, hoping the water would make them leave him alone. Elsewhere, the elder patriarch arrived at the academy and approached the pavilion. Knocking on the door, he called out to the young warrior but received no response. After a brief hesitation, he turned the knob and entered the room. Inside, he noticed herbs, jars and medicines, which made him wonder if the young warrior was a healer. Feeling it was intrusive to enter uninvited, he decided to leave, but the rustling sound from a pot caught his attention. Curious, he opened the pot and found a spider inside. His gaze shifted to the drawers where he discovered a gecko. Checking another pot, he saw beetles, alongside eggs and dried snakes scattered around. The elder was astounded. He couldn't comprehend how the young warrior managed to raise such venomous creatures and their offspring. Even the Tang clan, well-versed in handling poisons, had only been able to extract venom, not cultivate eggs like this. The elder realized his encounter with the young warrior was the true stroke of luck, far beyond the centipede's discovery. As the young warrior appeared and greeted him, the elder noticed the boy's concern about his bandaged arm. Dismissing it as a minor injury, the elder began to share something important but was interrupted by a sudden ominous energy. An explosion rocked the entrance behind them, and a shadowy figure began to emerge. As its form became clear, it resembled an ogre with a single eye and burned scars on one side of its face. The elder immediately shoved the young warrior aside, urging him to flee. The young warrior was caught off guard and confused. The monster let out a deafening roar and moved with alarming speed, attacking with its hand. The elder blocked the strike with his uninjured arm, enduring immense pain. The monster retaliated, throwing the elder back and sending him crashing into the ground. The area filled with dust as the elder struggled to catch his breath, coughing up blood. He realized the monster's strength rivaled that of his own father. He desperately told the young warrior to escape, but when the dust cleared, the scene revealed the young warrior being held in the air, choking as the monster gripped him tightly. The young warrior gasped for air as the monster roared with laughter. The creature mocked him, claiming he had heard that members of the Tang clan had arrived in Hainan. It sneered, saying no one could have imagined that the son of the myriad poison's divine sovereign would end up wounded and alone. The elder calmly retorted that he had no idea who the monster was and demanded to know why both he and the young warrior were being targeted. The creature scoffed, asking if its disfigured face and powerful fists didn't make it obvious. It then introduced itself as Takenyang, the blood hand Rakasa, and blamed the elder's father for its mutilated appearance. The elder recognized the name. He recalled hearing that Takenyang had been struck by a poison palm and fallen off a cliff, presumed dead. Yet here he was, alive and seething with vengeance. The elder tried reasoning with him, pleading for the release of the young warrior and offering his own life in exchange. But Takenyang refused, vowing to annihilate anyone associated with the Tang clan. Inwardly, the elder cursed this relentless demon, a term used for martial artists who sow chaos and destruction. It was clear Takenyang had no intention of sparing the young warrior. As the warrior's face grew pale from suffocation, Takenyang sneered and prepared to end his life. Desperately, the young warrior begged for mercy, his strength waning with every passing second. Just then, 3 pairs of fierce eyes flashed. The tiny centipedes lunged onto Takenyang's arm. The once adorable creatures revealed their ferocity, biting into the monster's skin with unrelenting force. Takenyang was taken aback, shouting angrily that mere centipedes couldn't harm him. But as he spoke, his neck turned violet, and he coughed up blood before collapsing in agony. The young warrior, now free, stumbled backward, staring in disbelief. He cautiously asked the elder if Takenyang had been a bad person. The elder, equally stunned, watched as the lifeless body of Takenyang lay on the ground. Slowly, his shock turned into a wide grin as he realized the young warrior was far more extraordinary than a mere guest. The elder thought to himself that this boy must join the Tang clan. A few days later, the elder was recovering, and the young warrior diligently cared for him, placing a damp cloth on his forehead. The elder expressed his gratitude, but the young warrior suggested instead that he tell him the whereabouts of his companions so he could check on them. Realizing he couldn't leave the elder alone and that calling for a doctor wasn't an option, the warrior stayed. The elder reassured him, saying he would recover with rest, but the warrior remained skeptical, bewildered at how calm the elder could be after such severe injuries. When the elder explained that martial artists had extraordinary resilience, the young warrior was incredulous. He asked if martial artists could fly and shoot fireballs. The elder chuckled and admitted that while not everyone could, it wasn't entirely far-fetched. The young warrior marveled at the strangeness of this world, acknowledging that things like giant centipedes only made sense here. The elder formally introduced himself as Tang Kailson of the Sichuan Tang Clan, and the young warrior introduced himself as Wei Soryang. Kailson noted the meaning of Soryang's name, small dragon, and remarked that it was fitting. Curious, Kailson asked if the centipedes on Soryang's body were venomous. Soryang casually rubbed one of the centipedes' bellies and confirmed that they were blue spot centipedes. The revelation made Kailson leap from the bed in shock. He asked if Soryang had tamed them and how he had managed such a feat. Soryang smiled and replied that it was a long story. When Kailson insisted he didn't mind, Soryang began recounting how he had raised the centipedes from eggs. When the story concluded, Kailson could hardly believe it and asked for confirmation. Soryang proudly affirmed that he had indeed raised them from eggs, predicting their hatching with precision. Still reeling, Kailson watched as Soryang opened a drawer and pulled out 2 lizards. The young warrior eagerly displayed them, pointing out the differences. One had a brown body with yellow and white stripes, while the other, a product of selective breeding, had a plain brown body and a white tail. Kaleson asked if Soryang had intentionally bred the lizards for their coloration. Blushing slightly, Soryang happily admitted that he had, simply because he found it beautiful. Kaleson gathered his composure and asked if the young warrior could breed the most venomous creatures to produce even deadlier ones. Soryang responded with a surprised, huh? In his mind, he considered the possibility, it was theoretically feasible. He then explained to Kaleson that if they could determine which creatures had the most potent venom, it might be possible. Before he could finish, Kaleson exclaimed with excitement, "Really? That's possible?" His enthusiasm startled Soryang. Without hesitation, Kaleson declared that Soryang should join his family immediately. This left Soryang completely bewildered. Kaleson sweetened the offer, promising that by joining the family, Soryang would gain access to their martial arts techniques, rare elixirs, herbs, and any poisons he desired. Kaleson further tempted him, saying someone of Soryang's skill could even capture or tame the legendary 10 great venomous creatures of the Central Plains. And if that wasn't enough, Kaleson casually mentioned one of the 3 flowers of the Central Plains, his daughter. Soryang shouted, "Hold on," and asked Kaleson to clarify what he had just said. Amused, Kaleson teased that while Soryang might be young, he was still a man. He continued talking about the flowers, but Soryang quickly interrupted, telling him to drop the subject. Shifting the topic, Soryang inquired about the 10 great venomous creatures, asking if they were as incredible as the blue spot centipede. Kaleson enthusiastically confirmed, explaining that while the blue spot centipede was remarkable, it ranked far below the legendary creatures. From giant scorpions to the golden frog that gleamed like gold, these creatures were beyond imagination. Kaleson grinned, sensing that he had piqued Soryang's interest. The young warrior's eyes sparkled with excitement. 2 days later, a member of the Tang clan arrived, alarmed by news of the blood hand Rakasa, Tak Anyang, appearing. Kaleson explained that Anyang had been hiding and honing his martial arts, reaching a level close to his father's. The Tang clan members speculated that if the patriarch had sent Anyang to his demise, it might mean he had reached the realm of 10,000 poisons. They began congratulating him, but Kaleson clarified that he hadn't been the one to defeat Anyang, it was the young warrior. This revelation stunned the clan members. One of them immediately clasped Soryang's hands, expressing their gratitude for saving the patriarch. They even speculated if Soryang was an elder rejuvenated to a younger form. Soryang, confused by their assumptions, looked to the patriarch for clarification. Kaleson requested Soryang to reveal the truth. Understanding the signal, Soryang patted his chest and called out, "Come on out." The Tang clan members watched in amazement as Soryang's clothes rustled, and 3 tiny centipedes peeked out. Gasps of astonishment filled the room as the little creatures crawled forward. The clan members recognized them as blue spot centipedes, creatures known for their venom. Kaleson explained that these centipedes had been the ones to defeat Anyang. The clan marveled at the feat, as taming such creatures was unheard of. Kaleson then declared his decision to formally accept Soryang into the Tang clan, but Soryang hesitated, saying he needed more time to think. A clan member encouraged Soryang, emphasizing the great opportunity, while Kaleson urged him to prepare quickly, hinting at something important they couldn't delay. Kaleson then explained the sinister nature of Anyang's martial art, the blood hand poison claw, a dark technique requiring human blood and bone marrow to reach mastery. Soryang found it grotesque. Kaleson continued, stressing that if Anyang had left behind secret scrolls or disciples, they needed to eliminate them to prevent the resurgence of such dangerous martial arts. He also mentioned the possibility of rescuing any captives. The patriarch then asked if Soryang would assist, considering his familiarity with Hainan Island. Soryang appeared pensive, realizing that joining the Tang clan would be a lifelong commitment. He thought to himself that before committing, it was essential to observe the clan's dynamics, just like assessing a workplace during an internship. Soryang agreed to help once the patriarch recovered. They praised his decision, but Soryang privately resolved to use the opportunity to evaluate the Tang clan thoroughly. After 3 days, Kaleson was well enough to travel. Together, they journeyed to a village near an abandoned martial academy, suspected to be Anyang's base. There, they began investigating reports of missing villagers. An elderly man mentioned that 1 or 2 people typically go missing in the jungle each year, but there haven't been any patterns of regular disappearances. Kaleson fell silent, lost in thought. They thanked the village chief for sharing the information. The chief replied humbly, expressing his honor in assisting the renowned patriarch of the Sichuan Tang Clan. They then took their leave, though they hadn't uncovered any significant leads. As they made their way through the forest, Soryang remarked to Kaleson that there didn't seem to be anything unusual about the village. Kaleson explained that when Anyang had revealed himself, it had been in that area, but the exact location was difficult to pinpoint. Soryang found it equally strange that there were no traces left behind. Remembering Anyang's words, he suddenly had an idea. Soryang asked if Kaleson recalled what Anyang had said when he appeared. Kaleson admitted that he didn't, as he'd been knocked away by Anyang's attack at the time. Soryang reminded him that Anyang had claimed to have heard that the Tang clan had come to Hainan, implying someone had informed him of their presence. Soryang proposed they retrace their steps through the places the Tang clan had visited in Hainan and ask around with Anyang's portrait. The Tang clan members were taken aback by Soryang's quick thinking. It made sense that someone who had seen them would have tipped off Anyang. Energized by the idea, they set out immediately. Their journey brought them to a gloomy village. One Tang clan member reported hearing rumors at the Hainan port that this was the village they were looking for. Kaleson confirmed it was a place where the Halai people lived, and he assumed they wouldn't be hostile. However, the village had an eerie, lifeless atmosphere. When the Tang clan called out, asking if anyone was around, a villager noticed them. The villagers appeared weak and sickly. An elderly man, possibly the village chief, approached while holding the hand of a frail little girl. 2 guards accompanied them, also looking unwell. Kailson introduced himself politely, while Soryong observed the interaction. He noticed how weak the child looked and how lifeless the villagers seemed. Soryong began suspecting something unusual. Many villagers appeared to have taken some kind of medicine. The chief denied that anything was wrong, insisting there were no missing villagers or unusual events. He abruptly told them to leave. When Chilson tried to point out the disproportion between the number of houses and the few people present, the chief cut him off, repeating that there was nothing of interest and urging them to leave again. Both Kailson and Soryong were puzzled. Kailson whispered to Soryong, wondering why the Halai people who should have been welcoming were acting this way. Soryong had no answer. Just then the little girl collapsed. Everyone was startled. The chief quickly cradled her in his arms, tears brimming in his eyes. He called out to her, saying she was his only remaining family and begging her not to leave him. The scene moved Kailson, who stepped forward and offered his help, explaining that he had some knowledge of medical arts. The chief hesitated and then asked if it was Central Plains medical knowledge. Kailson confirmed that, while he wasn't a physician, he had some expertise in medicine. The chief finally allowed him to examine the child. Before they entered, the chief explained that a plague had been spreading in the village, killing children and weakening healthy adults. He begged Kailson to try to save his granddaughter. Kailson promised to do his best. As they were ushered inside, Soryong asked the Tang Clan member if the elder truly knew medical arts. The member explained that the Tang Clan's deep knowledge of poisons also made them skilled in medicine. He added that martial arts training often begins with an understanding of one's own body, which includes medical knowledge. Soryong thought to himself that if he joined the Tang Clan, learning medical arts would be far preferable to mastering their terrifying poison techniques. However, his thoughts were interrupted when the man casually mentioned that they sometimes tested poisons on captured criminals to study the effects. Soryong's expression turned comical as he realized this meant human experimentation, making him increasingly uneasy. Meanwhile, the streets of the village were eerily quiet. Inside one of the homes, Kailson sighed and explained that he had transferred some of his ki to the girl, stabilizing her breathing. The chief was overwhelmed with gratitude and begged them to save his only granddaughter. Kailson brought up an important point, noting that something seemed strange about the child's pulse. He asked if she had been born with a weak heart. The village chief explained that her illness began about 6 months ago. Not only his granddaughter but others in the village also started falling ill around the same time. They referred to it as a mysterious disease. That was why he initially told them to leave when they arrived at the village's entrance. Kailson reassured the chief, saying he would provide good medicine for the heart. He asked the chief to gather the villagers so they could distribute the remedy. Overcome with emotion, the chief burst into tears, expressing his heartfelt gratitude. Soryong quietly observed Kailson's actions with admiration. Later that night, as Kailson walked with Gu Pai, a member of the Tang Clan, Pai acknowledged the effort Kailson had put into treating the villagers. Kailson thanked him before Pai inquired about the symptoms. Kailson explained they were unusual: lethargy, swollen eyes, mild fever, irregular pulses, but the most severe cases all involved heart issues. Curious, Kailson asked about Soryong's whereabouts. Pai replied that Soryong, likely exhausted from helping despite having no martial arts training, had gone to bed. Kailson agreed that it was understandable and decided to check on him. Pai offered to lead the way. When they entered Soryong's room, they found him sleeping soundly on the bed, with 3 centipedes resting in a basket nearby. Kailson observed from the doorway before suddenly stepping inside. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and slapped Soryong. Soryong jolted awake, clutching his stinging cheek, confused and in pain. He demanded to know why Kailson had hit him. Kailson, with a serious expression, apologized and explained there had been a bug on Soryong's face, and he had only wanted to get rid of it. Soryong looked at him skeptically but allowed Kailson to explain further. Kailson said he had come to check on him before going to bed but noticed the bug. In this region, venomous insects were common, so he had acted quickly to prevent any danger. He showed Soryong the bug, a large, unsettling creature. Soryong was startled by the sight and then seemed to piece something together. He asked Kailson if all the patients with different symptoms shared one common condition: arrhythmia. Kailson confirmed this. Soryong suddenly realized the source of the village's mysterious illness and pointed at the bug, declaring it the culprit. He identified the insect as a kissing bug, a member of the Reduviidae family. These bugs feed on blood, often biting near the eyes or lips, and are so discreet they can draw blood more quietly than a mosquito. Known as vampire or assassin bugs, they aren't venomous but carry harmful parasites in their stomachs. When they bite, their excrement can transmit diseases like Chagas disease, a deadly illness that ranks high among animal-caused human fatalities. Soryong then asked the village chief if the village's dogs exhibited symptoms similar to those of the sick humans, such as shortness of breath. The chief confirmed they did and asked if the bug was to blame. Soryong affirmed this, adding that with proper medicine, his granddaughter and others could be saved. Kailson grinned and asked Pai what he thought. Pai commented on Soryong's perceptiveness, praising him as a young warrior of great potential. Watching them, Soryong was baffled by their expressions and wondered what was going on. They reminded him that they were members of the Sichuan Tang Clan. When Soryong's puzzled face made it clear he didn't understand the significance, Kailson repeated the statement. Internally Soryong thought, so what? His irritated and confused expression was unintentionally amusing. Kailson began explaining the concept of gu. Some believed these were venomous parasites, while others thought of them as a form of witchcraft. According to him, malicious individuals in China bred these bugs to cause suffering or manipulate others. They would feed the bugs to people, causing either excruciating pain or complete subjugation. Soryong found the idea hard to believe. Kaelson acknowledged it sounded extraordinary but added that many martial artists had been killed by Gu, forced to harm their families, or enslaved by these evil practitioners. Because of this, efforts to develop antidotes to Gu had been relentless. These cures could either expel the parasites from the body or destroy them entirely. As Kaelson spoke, Soryong began to grasp the gravity of the situation. Kaelson posed a question. If someone had succeeded in creating a cure, who could it be? With pride, he declared that it could only be the renowned Sichuan Tang family. He explained that if they had something capable of dissolving a fist-sized roundworm inside a body, dealing with a tiny bug would be no trouble. Then he revealed the curse-melting orb, stating that even a small dose of this medicine would suffice. Soryong expressed mild amusement, though inwardly he reflected on how extravagant the name sounded for what was essentially an anti-parasitic drug. They reassured the village chief that they could save his granddaughter, and soon enough the villagers began recovering, starting with her. The chief was deeply relieved, and the villagers' warm hospitality was an unexpected but welcome reward. The villagers, with their bright and cheerful demeanor, lived up to their reputation for optimism. Kaelson acknowledged that the situation would have been much harder without Soryong's insight in identifying the cause of the illness. He humbly redirected the villagers' gratitude to Soryong, praising him as their true savior. Despite the Tang family's medicine curing the villagers, Kaelson insisted on giving all the credit to Soryong. Watching the villagers thank Soryong brought Kaelson great satisfaction, as though he were the one being celebrated. Soryong was touched by this gesture. The villagers rejoiced, lifting Soryong and tossing him into the air repeatedly in celebration. Later, the village chief pulled Kaelson aside to revisit their earlier conversation at the village entrance. When Kaelson asked what it was about, the chief mentioned the villages where people had gone missing. Intrigued, Kaelson asked for more details. The chief explained that one of the women in their village, originally from another settlement, had shared a troubling story. Years ago, her hometown suffered a tragedy where several villagers mysteriously disappeared. They believed they had finally uncovered the truth. Kaelson inquired about the village's location, and the chief pointed them westward. Upon arrival, the stench of decay was overwhelming, confirming they were in the right place. The scene was grim. Corpses, refuse, and insects littered the area, with poison lingering in the air. Pai warned Soryong not to look, but Soryong had already seen it all. Amid the carnage, a man spotted something unusual, a golden chicken foot peeking out of a pile. On closer inspection, it was attached to a bird, a magnificent creature with a golden tail and feathers in shades of purple, pink, and black. The bird radiated an almost magical aura. One of the men, angered by the bird's presence among the dead, hurled a rock at it despite Kaelson's attempt to stop him. The rock missed, but it caught the bird's attention. Kaelson, sensing danger, placed a calming hand on the man's shoulder, warning that something felt off. The bird spread its wings, releasing a toxic miasma that melted nearby skeletons. Startled, Soryong was grabbed by someone who covered his mouth to prevent him from inhaling the poison. Kaelson commanded everyone to flee while shielding Soryong. He explained that the creature was a jinyao, a poison-feathered bird. Once safe, the group gathered around Kaelson, who described the bird in detail. Its wingspan reached 5 feet, its sharp beak gleamed bronze, and its body was cloaked in vibrant purple feathers. The creature could spread death with a single movement, turning everything around it to poison. Atop its head sat a golden crown, giving it an air of regal menace. Soryong, captivated, asked if it was one of the 10 great venomous creatures. Kaelson confirmed that it was and explained that the jinyao held the top rank, earning the title of the king of all venom. Soryong's excitement was palpable as he imagined how even the most dangerous insects and snakes seemed tame in comparison. Kaelson explained that the jinyao was likely drawn to the area by venomous snakes, as it only consumed the heads of such creatures. When Soryong asked how common they were, Kaelson replied that sightings were rare, perhaps once in a century. Fascinated, Soryong asked if it was possible to capture the creature. His question left the Tang members stunned. Kaelson, however, was amused and inquired if Soryong truly wanted to try catching it. When Soryong admitted he did but expressed concern about the venom, Kaelson smiled knowingly. He remarked on Soryong's keen interest in the 10 great venomous creatures and assured him that if he was serious, there was indeed a way. Soryong was astonished. Kaelson explained that if he mastered the Tang clan's poison techniques, he would gain immunity to all toxins and even withstand Jinyao's venom. Only through the martial arts of their clan could one nullify all poisons in the world. Kaelson, ever cunning, casually mentioned that their techniques are never taught to outsiders. Even if he wished to help as the patriarch, he couldn't break the clan's rules. Eagerly, Soryong asked if joining the family would grant him the right to learn. He also inquired whether achieving immunity to poison would truly let him endure Jinyao's venom. Kaelson confirmed and promised to teach him everything without reservation if Soryong agreed immediately. He also assured him that he would personally oversee his progress. However, Kaelson added that if Soryong hesitated too long, he might reconsider. Feeling the pressure, Soryong declared his decision to join the clan and expressed his anticipation for Kaelson's guidance, calling him patriarch instead of elder. Kaelson's mischievous grin betrayed his satisfaction, though he acted as if he hadn't coerced Soryong into agreeing. Kaelson told Soryong that from that moment onward, he would forever be part of their family. Back at a decayed location, traces of the blood hand Rakshasa, Tak Anyang, were found in a cave. Footsteps led to a notebook discovered inside, which was brought to Kaelson. After scanning its contents, he confirmed it held the secret techniques of the blood hand poison claw. Soryong was unnerved, noting it was written in blood. Kaelson decided it was time to return. When Soryong asked if they were heading to Sichuan, Kaelson replied that it was the best course of action now that they had secured the blue spot centipede's core and the manual. Soryong requested a stop at the academy to release his friends and gather his belongings, which Kaelson approved. As they departed, Soryong glanced behind and noticed something unusual. Pointing it out, they discovered a shining purple feather from the Jinyao. They all stared at it thoughtfully. Kailsun picked it up and told Soryong it would serve as a keepsake to commemorate his joining the family. Soryong expressed interest and thanked him, but Kailsun corrected him, suggesting he change how he addressed him after the upcoming ceremony. Soryong wondered if it would be some kind of initiation ritual. Meanwhile, at the Tang clan, the Grand Patriarch Tang Musong had finally returned. Exhausted, he wasted no time and inquired about Huayan's condition. Clan members rushed him inside, reporting that she was barely holding on to life. The door opened and Musong immediately called for Huayan. Those inside were surprised by his arrival. He informed his daughter-in-law that he had succeeded in acquiring the medicine and revealed the blue spot centipede's core. Overcome with relief, the daughter-in-law began to cry. Preparations were made to administer the medicine. Musong was deeply moved by Huayan's pained expression, thankful he had hurried back in time. At his daughter-in-law's urging, Musong gave the medicine to his granddaughter. A radiant blue light enveloped her as he placed a finger on her wrist to check her pulse. Everyone anxiously hoped for her to open her eyes, watching and waiting. Meanwhile, Soryong felt groggy, marveling at the vastness of the Central Plains, which far exceeded his expectations. The journey had taken over a month and a half, beginning with a boat ride from Hainan to Hangzhou and continuing through Nanjing before finally arriving in Sichuan. At the residence of the Sichuan Tang Clan, Pai excitedly announced their destination to Soryong. Standing at the grand entrance, Soryong gaped as he learned the entire mountain belonged to the Tang Clan, aptly named Tang Clan Mountain. He swallowed nervously, overwhelmed by the sight. Immediately, members of the Tang Clan emerged to greet the patriarch. Soryong was astonished by their sheer numbers, wondering if all of them belonged to the Sichuan Tang Clan. Among the crowd, a girl in a red dress ran toward them, her face lit with tears of joy as she called out for her father. It was Huayan. She embraced her father tightly, crying tears of relief. Soryong meanwhile was spellbound. Her radiant beauty left him speechless, surpassing even the celebrity he had once been involved with in his past life. Chilsun, pleased to see his daughter alive, introduced Huayan to Soryong. Dazed, Soryong struggled to piece together Chilsun's earlier comments, muttering something about weeds or grass before Chilsun corrected him. It was all about the flower. Huayan's cheeks flushed red. Chilsun told Soryong that the girl beside him was the flower he had previously dismissed. Soryong was left dumbfounded. He recalled their earlier conversation about the flower and felt a wave of embarrassment. In that moment he knew he had made a grave mistake. He never imagined he had overlooked the chance of being with such a beautiful woman, the only daughter of the Sichuan Tang Clan, famously known as the venomous flower, Tang Huayan. Since childhood, Huayan carried a hidden emotional weight. She once overheard elders discussing her. While they were uncertain of her talent, they agreed her beauty was exceptional, enough to rank her among the 3 flowers of the Muram. The conversation shifted to finding her a suitable husband. One elder mentioned suggesting the patriarch take a second wife, but the patriarch had declined, leaving him baffled. Hearing this, Huayan resolved to prove herself to the clan by excelling in their martial arts. She wanted to show that even as a woman she could contribute greatly to the family. However, her impatience led her astray, creating an internal heart demon that caused a key deviation in her training. When Huayan awoke, her mother, the Grand Patriarch, and 2 others surrounded her bed. Her mother looked visibly relieved. Tears streamed from Huayan's eyes as she apologized, lamenting that she had failed her family and lost all her inner chi. Her grandfather, the Grand Patriarch, called her a brat and told her to stop crying. He reminded her how far she had come to reach the level of mastering 100 poisons and told her to cheer up. Huayan's confusion grew when he mentioned 100 poisons. She noticed her aura glowing and asked for clarification. The Grand Patriarch revealed a story about a mysterious young warrior who had not only saved her life but also endowed her with the inner chi of 1,000 poisons, far surpassing what she had previously achieved. In the present, Huayan asked about weed, leaving Soryong utterly embarrassed. His earlier flippant remark comparing her to weeds resurfaced in his mind. He berated his past self for such thoughtlessness but tried to dismiss the moment by joking that the patriarch had taken the comment too seriously. Gathering himself, he greeted Huayan formally, stating how glad he was to see her healthy. Huayan introduced herself as Tang Huayan, also known as the venomous flower. She expressed her gratitude, promising never to forget the life-saving favor he had done for her. Soryong, entranced by her beauty, struggled to form coherent thoughts. Kailsun interrupted, asking Soryong what he thought of his daughter. To Soryong's shock, he heard a voice in his head, realizing it was some form of sound transmission. Kailsun teased, asking if Soryong agreed that Huayan was stunning and hinted at the possibility of them growing closer. Later, Soryong rested in a large bath, feeling utterly drained. Nearby, the centipedes he had cared for were sleeping peacefully in a basket. He noticed one waking up and, surprisingly, smiling at him. Despite their intimidating appearance, they seemed to understand his words when he warned them about the hot water, willingly staying in the bucket as he suggested. Amused by their behavior, Soryong recalled Pai's mention that centipedes were spiritual creatures. He made a mental note to learn more about them later. However, Kailsun's earlier remarks about Huayan lingered in his mind, leaving him restless. At another pavilion, the family gathered around a large table. The Grand Patriarch, the Patriarch, his wife, and Huayan. Kailsun announced his decision to give Soryong the East Wing Room, a space traditionally reserved for couples in Chinese residences. The Grand Patriarch questioned if Soryong was truly that talented. Kailsun confirmed, explaining that Soryong's remarkable abilities went far beyond mere chance encounters. He elaborated that Soryong not only possessed unparalleled knowledge of venomous creatures but also defeated Ouyang, encountered legendary spiritual creatures, and even hatched the blue spot centipede eggs himself. The Grand Patriarch commented on the Patriarch's luck in finding such a treasure. The conversation then turned to Huayan. Kailson told his daughter that he wished to make Soryong his son-in-law, asking for her opinion. As Huayan processed her father's words, realization dawned on her. She grew quiet. Huayan wanted to prove that she could bring greater value to the clan now that she possessed the 1,000 Poisons constitution, surpassing the mere 100 Poisons constitution. She responded that as a member of the Tang clan, she understood her father's intentions. However, she declared that it was her responsibility to determine if the young warrior was truly deserving of her. Without waiting for a reply, she dashed out of the room, leaving behind an awkward atmosphere. In Kailson's mind, he thought the young warrior ought to be cautious. Though his rose was stunningly beautiful, her thorns were equally sharp. Huayan ran swiftly, her emotions in turmoil. Now that she had achieved the 1,000 Poisons constitution, she was determined not to stop there. She knew that unless she pushed further, the elders would never fully recognize her. She resolved to evaluate the young warrior thoroughly from his abilities to his character. Meanwhile, Soryong was lost in thought, contemplating how to navigate the situation. He suspected Huayan might harbor resentment toward him. Half-jokingly he asked his centipedes, his kids, for advice. Suddenly Huayan appeared before him, stunning him completely. She was breathtaking. Side note, the art style here is so vivid it feels like a scene straight out of a classic manhwa. Back to the moment, Huayan quickly excused herself, saying she was in a hurry, and asked for his hand. Soryong extended his hand hesitantly, blushing as he did so, feeling like a loyal pet offering a paw. Trying to lighten the tension, he suggested that they should only do such things after getting closer, as there's a proper order to such matters. Huayan froze for a moment before understanding his misunderstanding. Her face turned beet red as she corrected him, insisting that wasn't her intention at all. Realizing his mistake, Soryong felt a wave of embarrassment. Huayan sighed and clarified again, explaining that she had only wanted to check his pulse. She apologized for startling him by suddenly asking for his hand. Sitting beside him, she admitted that her approach had been abrupt and assured him that she only wanted to explain some things. Soryong listened attentively. Huayan began recounting her struggles, sharing how, as the Tang clan's sole direct descendant, she constantly faced schemes from the branch families. To secure the family's future, the elders had decided to seek a capable son-in-law. They even considered how Soryong's role within the family might change should he join. She apologized in advance for needing to confirm something but assured him that no matter the outcome, she would treat him with respect as her benefactor, potentially even as a sworn sibling. Soryong reassured her, offering his hand again and saying she was free to confirm whatever she needed. Huayan placed her hand on his wrist, emitting a faint blue aura as she assessed his pulse. She explained that the Tang clan's martial arts were unique. They required practitioners to adapt to toxins gradually as their internal energy grew. The poisons were ranked: 5 poisons, 10 poisons, 100 poisons, 1,000 poisons, and finally 10,000 poisons. To her surprise, Soryong's body could adapt to 10 poisons, a rare feat for someone not born into the Tang clan. However, it was only 10 poisons, which meant his aptitude would place him at the level of a first-rate martial artist but no higher. She explained that this was the pinnacle someone without innate talent could reach. She then took her leave, leaving Soryong deep in thought. Alone, Soryong mulled over the revelation. The 10-poison body? His face paled at the implications. It might mean he couldn't capture the Jinyao, a crucial goal for him. Hours later, Huayan stepped out of her bath. Despite washing multiple times a day, she noticed her body emitted a strange scent ever since she had absorbed the blue spot centipede's inner core. Dressing herself, she wondered if it was some sort of punishment for her ungrateful words toward her savior. Meanwhile, Soryong was fast asleep, dreaming of a conversation with someone who thanked him for his kindness. It was Huayan, or so it seemed. When he asked if it was a dream, the figure explained that while it felt dreamlike, it was not. The entity revealed herself as the blue spot centipede, borrowing Huayan's appearance to avoid startling him. She introduced herself as the mother of all the creatures Soryong had encountered. Just then, 3 small girls appeared, and Soryong deduced that they were the centipede's offspring. He asked her how she managed to appear in his dreams. She explained that after being mercilessly killed, leaving her children behind, her lingering grudge reached the heavens, and her spirit became trapped in her inner core. She added that while she had been cursing the girl who consumed her core, an opportunity to resolve her grudge arose, allowing her to manifest in his dreams. This was possible because he had taken all her children with him. Soryong silently acknowledged his role in revealing her location, which indirectly led to her demise. Though unintentional, he still felt responsible for the death of the blue spot centipede. Watching her, he listened as she asked if her benefactor could grant her one request. Without hesitation, he promised to fulfill whatever she wished. Her request was simple. She asked him to care for her children until they were fully grown. Soryong was puzzled, noting that centipedes typically become independent after molting twice. She clarified that while this was true for ordinary centipedes, her species was unique. Until her offspring molted twice, they required the flow of qi from their mother's inner core to survive. Only afterward could they sustain themselves by feeding on the qi of other beings. This revelation led Soryong to ask whether the children needed to remain with Huayan, as she had consumed the inner core. The mother centipede explained the circumstances. She admitted that, in her anger, she had cursed Huayan, causing her body to emit a foul odor. The curse ensured no man would approach her, preventing her from ever having children. However, she was willing to lift the curse if her children were allowed to absorb the qi from Huayan's inner core. Perhaps in this way, Soryong could even win the girl's heart. Soryong considered her words carefully before smiling and responding that it didn't feel right. He couldn't take advantage of Huayan's predicament. The mother centipede admired his integrity and asked how he planned to handle the situation. She reminded him that Huayan sought strength in a man, and she couldn't magically procure the inner cores of the 10 great venomous creatures to aid him. This sparked an idea in Soryong. He asked her to trust him, assuring her that everything would work out. The next day, Soryang and Hwayan sat side by side. Hwayan now understood that the strange smell emanating from her body was due to the blue spot centipede's inner core. Soryang explained that by attaching the centipedes to her body every few days and letting them absorb the qi, the odor would naturally fade away. Hwayan hesitated before asking if he was truly okay with helping her without asking for anything in return. She knew he could easily demand compensation for his assistance. Soryang smiled and told her he couldn't bring himself to exploit a woman's difficult situation, refusing to act shamelessly. Hwayan was surprised by his response and felt guilty. She told him she couldn't continue accepting his kindness without offering something in return. Her father's words began to weigh more heavily on her. Seeing Soryang's selflessness made her realize that qualities beyond talent or martial prowess were important. Soryang then shared his own thoughts. Referring to her earlier remark about his 10-poison body, he revealed an ambitious plan. Since he could only absorb 10 types of toxins, he resolved to fill those slots with the toxins of the 10 most venomous creatures in the Central Plains. Hwayan was shocked, interpreting his words as a bold declaration to become the strongest under the heavens, all for her sake. The thought made her cheeks flush. For Tang Hwayan, one of the 3 flowers of Murim and the venomous flower of the Tang Clan, this was the first time a man had made such an audacious confession to her. Blushing, she asked if he realized what he had just said. Soryang, confused, replied that he didn't. Hwayan told him the path he spoke of would be incredibly difficult and demanding, potentially requiring 10, 20, or even a lifetime of effort. Soryang's face fell as he worried aloud about how long it might take, amusing Hwayan as she continued to blush. Then, with growing embarrassment, Hwayan brought up that Soryang was only 15 years old. She told him that in 3 years, when he came of age and was ready for marriage, if he succeeded in defeating even one of the 10 great venomous creatures by then, she would consider it. Blushing deeply, she admitted that if he succeeded, there might even be a possibility of a wedding. She cheered loudly, saying she would be rooting for him, then bolted away. Soryang was confused and called out to her. She stopped, turned around and asked if there was anything else he wanted to say. He suggested that she get some rest and stay for a couple of hours. Embarrassed, she hesitated but eventually returned. He reassured her there was no need to worry since the little centipedes wouldn't bite. Gathering his kids, he told them to go to their mom instead of their dad. Hearing this made Hwayan's face flush as red as a tomato. She asked him what he meant by calling them mom and dad, but Soryang quickly clarified that it wasn't what she thought. Meanwhile, Chilson, his wife, and Muziang were seated at the table discussing the young warrior's exceptional talent and how it seemed to have failed to win their daughter's heart. Muziang asked if anyone had seen them earlier that morning. He remarked that it seemed like something was developing between the two. Hwayan's mother speculated that her daughter might have rejected the young warrior. The men pondered deeply. Muziang commented that forcing a marriage wouldn't be right and suggested allowing their feelings to grow naturally. Hwayan's mother proposed having Hwayan oversee the young warrior's martial arts training to spend more time together, believing it could help them bond. Chilson agreed it was a solid plan. Muziang added that they could consult the elder healer sage to see if he could bestow the purifying elixir of marrow and essence to enhance the young warrior's aptitude. Chilson was surprised, noting that such an opportunity hadn't even been extended to Hwayan, so they shouldn't get their hopes up. Muziang acknowledged the point. At that moment, Hwayan appeared outside the door announcing herself. Chilson invited her in and asked what brought her there at that hour. She blushed, surprised to see the 3 of them together. She said she had something to share, blushed again and then, all at once, declared she would do as her father had suggested. Chilson was taken aback and asked what she meant. Her mother invited her to sit and asked if she was implying that the young warrior had caught her interest. Embarrassed, Hwayan couldn't respond. Chilson pressed her further, curious about the sudden change since she had previously shown little interest in him. Gathering her courage, Hwayan explained that Soryang had told her he would become the greatest in the world for her. He had promised. Chilson, astonished, asked her to elaborate. She added that although Soryang's innate talent was limited to a 10-poison body, he vowed to make up for it by defeating the 10 great venomous creatures for her sake. Muziang laughed heartily, calling the young man bold. Chilson was stunned, while Hwayan's mother was impressed, remarking that it was rare to find such a determined suitor. Hwayan admitted that although her heart was inclined, she had told Soryang she would only agree to marriage if he could capture one of the 10 great venomous creatures before coming of age. Her father joked that she should have raised the bar to 3 creatures, while her mother commented that men often miss subtle hints. Hwayan asked if she should go explain it to him. Her mother advised against it, reasoning that if Soryang didn't realize their tacit approval, he would only work harder. Muziang suggested treating him as a prospective son-in-law while pretending they were undecided, confident that his efforts would naturally lead him to become part of the family. Meanwhile, the mother centipede praised Soryang, telling him he had completely won Hwayan's heart. Soryang replied that success came down to determination and persistence. She smiled warmly at him, calling him her benefactor. She then informed him that her lingering resentment had been resolved and her soul would soon ascend to the afterlife. Before departing, she offered to grant him one last request, within her ability to fulfill. Soryang paused to think and then asked if he could examine her body. The request made her feel shy, though she believed it was to be expected from a man. She assumed he was succumbing to human desires and reluctantly began revealing her shoulder, preparing to undress. Startled, Soryang quickly asked if she really needed to take her clothes off. Blushing deeply, she hesitated and asked if she shouldn't. Soryang hastily clarified that it wasn't what he had meant, further deepening her embarrassment. It was amusing to see the children covering their eyes. Soryang clarified that he only wanted to see the true appearance of a blue spot centipede. Realizing his intention, the centipede's mother hesitated, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. Smoke enveloped the area, and she revealed her true form. Soryang gasped, overwhelmed by her magnificent and enormous appearance. His excitement was palpable. Without waiting for permission, he reached out to touch her, marveling at her size and asking endless questions. Was her body waterproof? How strong was her venom? Could he touch her legs, her antennae, even her fangs? The sheer enthusiasm in his voice was undeniable. The children continued covering their eyes, which only added to the charm of the moment. The centipede mother was slightly embarrassed by his passionate curiosity, particularly when he insisted on touching her fangs despite her warnings of their danger. She began to wonder if her daughters would truly be safe with a man like Soryong, whose touch carried an unusual energy. She couldn't help but laugh, finding it odd yet endearing how he drooled slightly while running his hands over her. Later, Chelson invited Soryong for tea. Chelson revealed that he'd learned everything from Wyan and declared that Soryong would be accepted as their son-in-law. Surprised, Soryong tried to clarify that he thought the arrangement was conditional and would require 3 years to finalize. Chelson dismissed his concerns, stating the marriage would naturally happen when he came of age. Wyan's mother warmly welcomed Soryong into the family, referring to him as her son-in-law. Mu Seong expressed his satisfaction, noting that Wyan had found an exceptional partner and that their clan would thrive even more. Soryong glanced at Wyan, perplexed by how quickly things had progressed. Despite his confusion, he decided to play along and replied politely that he looked forward to their guidance. When Mu Seong suggested getting started immediately, Soryong grew curious. Chelson explained that before Soryong could learn the Tang Clan's poison arts, he must first experience the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. With a sly grin, Chelson assured him it was something he would undoubtedly appreciate. The family led Soryong to the hall, a place of great significance to the Tang Clan. Soryong, excited by the prospect, assumed it was a treasure trove of poisons. However, as they walked, his attention drifted to Wyan's side profile. He couldn't help but admire her beauty, likening the moment to a living portrait. His obvious admiration didn't go unnoticed by his in-laws, who exchanged amused glances. Chelson teased him, joking that if Soryong kept staring at his daughter like that, he might wear out her face. He reminded him that Wyan was his woman now, yet Soryong gazed at her as though she were still untouchable. Wyan's mother chimed in, noting that Soryong seemed utterly captivated by her. Both Wyan and Soryong turned crimson with embarrassment. As they approached the hall, 3 men stood before a massive iron door. 2 muscular guards flanked a Tang Clan official, who welcomed the Grand Patriarch and his grandson-in-law. At Muzian's command, the gates were opened. The guards strained against the weight of the colossal doors, forged from rare Kunyu steel sourced from the southern wilderness. As the doors creaked open, Soryong observed the immense effort required. Though the gates finally yielded, the guards were visibly drained. Amused by their struggle, Soryong couldn't help but think how over-the-top the security was for something reminiscent of the Middle Ages. Chelson, noticing Soryong's concern, explained that the Kunyu steel was renowned for its unmatched durability. The Hall of 10,000 Poisons lay before them, and Soryong braced himself for what awaited inside. Even opening the gate was considered a privilege. Once inside, they arrived at the treasure vault where the Tang Clan of Sichuan safeguarded its vast collection of poisons. This remarkable repository, known as the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, housed an incredible variety of toxins. Muzian cautioned Soryong to be careful and avoid touching anything recklessly. Soryong nodded, affirming his understanding, but he couldn't help confirming whether the hall truly contained 10,000 poisons. Chelson chuckled, explaining that the poisons were meticulously classified into categories like paralysis poisons, sleep poisons and countless others. The elders, always playful, decided to tease the young pair. Chelson suggested that Wyan explain the poisons to Soryong, knowing he would enjoy learning from her. The suggestion made both Wyan and Soryong blush with embarrassment. Despite her awkwardness, Wyan accepted the task. Taking Soryong by the hand, she guided him to see the Tang Clan's most potent poison. Wyan's discomfort was evident, while the elders watched the two with amused expressions. She began her explanation by pointing out the chi-dissipating poison, which rendered a martial artist's energy unusable with just a single inhalation. She advised Soryong to handle it with extreme care. She then introduced other deadly poisons, the alimentary canal necrotizing poison, the spirit-destroying poison, the bloody pulp poison, and even the infamous 7-step soul-snatching poison. Each was immensely powerful, but Wyan emphasized that the strongest poison of the Tang Clan was something far beyond these. She handed Soryong a tiny seed. Confused, he noted to himself that it resembled a tiger bean. Wyan explained that this seed, though small, contained the most powerful poison known, apart from the venoms of the 10 great venomous creatures. She revealed it as the seed of the castor plant, a symbol of the Tang Clan. Soryong immediately recognized its significance. He thought of ricin, a deadly toxalbumin, lethal in minuscule amounts, infamous for its use during the Cold War and assassinations. Soryong muttered that the seed came closest to the Tang Clan's ideal of a perfect poison, colorless, odorless, tasteless, and invisible. Wyan elaborated, calling it golden poison. When used, its victims experienced what the Tang Clan referred to as a golden death. She emphasized that the strongest poison wasn't about causing the most excruciating pain or the bloodiest death. It was about silent, swift, and untraceable lethality. The Tang Clan's poison arts, she explained, embodied the principles of stealth and certainty. To Soryong, it felt like he was learning the methods of an assassin's guild. Muxiang interrupted, saying it was enough for now and suggested they move on to see the venomous creatures Soryong had been so eager to encounter. He even offered Soryong the chance to oversee their care, with full support from the clan. In Soryong's mind, this translated to the clan indulging his passion as a hobby. His excitement was obvious. Before they could proceed, a messenger named Pai arrived, panting heavily. He urgently informed the Patriarch of a situation at the Black Tortoise Pavilion. The Patriarch asked what had happened, and Pai hesitated before mentioning 2 issues. First, the medicine sent to the Sichuan city lord had failed to achieve the desired effect, prompting a letter of complaints. Pai hesitated again before revealing the second issue, glancing at Soryang. Soryang sighed knowingly. Pai finally explained that it concerned the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Muxiang guessed that rumors were already spreading and decided they needed to address the matter immediately. He ordered Soryang to accompany them. At the Black Tortoise Pavilion, the elders wasted no time voicing their grievances to the patriarch. They were outraged by his unilateral decision to pair Wuyun with an orphan of unknown origins. This remark infuriated Chiu-san, who began to emit a green aura as he questioned whether they were insulting his son-in-law. Despite Chiu-san's anger, the elders persisted, claiming their concerns were valid. Muxiang silenced them with a sharp rebuke, declaring that the decision was his alone. He demanded to know if they had any objections to his authority. The elders, caught off guard by his outburst, sought support from the Grand Patriarch, urging him to intervene. They argued that entrusting the Hall of 10,000 Poisons to an outsider with unproven skills was reckless. Muxiang, however, firmly reiterated that his approval was final. Meanwhile, Wuyun, conscious of Soryang's discomfort, quietly whispered an apology to him. In Soryang's mind, his initial reaction was simply goodness. He sighed as it dawned on him that his actions had caused her to worry. He thought to himself that it was she who should be apologizing. Everyone was taken aback when Soryang suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, "sorry to interrupt your discussion." He then proposed addressing the issue himself, stating that since the problem stemmed from his perceived lack of ability, he would prove his skills to the clan elders. The elders were stunned into silence, and Soryang went on to suggest resolving the Sichuan city lord's troublesome complaint as a demonstration of his capabilities. Wuyun, whispering in disbelief, asked what he was trying to achieve. Though Soryang was not one to draw attention or make a scene, he couldn't stand by while his peaceful life as a pet owner was being disrupted. His boldness left the elders momentarily speechless before their indignation erupted. They scolded him for interrupting the elders' discussion and demanded if he even knew the contents of the Sichuan city lord's letter before barging in. Calling him insolent and irrelevant, they complained to the patriarch about his interference. The elders seized the opportunity to argue for a son-in-law from a reputable martial family instead. Chao Sen's wife, however, was visibly annoyed by their tirade. Meanwhile, Soryang internally remarked on how absurd these old codgers sounded the longer they spoke. Recalling his days as Spicy Fabre, a streamer with over 1 million subscribers and thousands of viewers per session, he likened the elders' complaints to the nonsensical trolling he used to deal with. Addressing the group, Soryang pointed out that they still refused to acknowledge him as the Sichuan Tang Clan's son-in-law, meaning he was merely a guest. With his streaming experience, Soryang was well versed in handling chaos. He reminded them that he had saved the clan's beloved Lady Huayun, defeated the bloodhand Rakshasa Takanyang, and saved the patriarch's life. He then challenged them, asking if it was part of the clan's etiquette to insult a guest and benefactor to their face. The elders, embarrassed by his pointed remarks, admitted to speaking rashly out of desperation. Inwardly, Soryang thought of them as pathetic. The Grand Patriarch, however, appeared impressed by his composure and cleverness. One elder tried to downplay the significance of defeating Takanyang, claiming it was overstated. The Patriarch quickly silenced the objection by presenting a document, none other than the secret manual of the blood sect's bloodhand poison arts, written in blood. The elders gasped in shock. Their astonishment deepened when the Patriarch asked Soryang to reveal his companions. Tapping his chest gently, Soryang summoned the 3 baby spotted centipedes, which emerged happily. The elders grew visibly uneasy at the sight of the creatures. The Patriarch proudly explained that these were the offspring of the blue-spotted centipede, and Soryang had been raising them. He further revealed that these centipedes were the ones that had killed Takanyang. One elder, still in disbelief, confirmed if Soryang had truly managed to control a blue-spotted centipede. Soryang and the Patriarch shared knowing grins, teasing the elders. Chao San added that addressing Soryang as a young warrior instead of recognizing him as the clan's son-in-law was telling. Soryang even joked, warning the centipedes not to bite anyone unless they wanted to end up as lifeless as Takanyang. The elders, thoroughly flustered, began backtracking. They denied refusing to accept Soryang, offering feeble excuses about proper procedures and natural hesitations. The Grand Patriarch, exasperated, decided to table the discussion on Soryang's status for the moment and focused on the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. He asked why Soryang was not allowed entry, to which the elders replied that Soryang was not fully integrated into the family and was too young to be entrusted with such responsibility. The Grand Patriarch, seeing an easy solution, asked Soryang to demonstrate his abilities. Soryang smiled confidently and declared that he would prove himself worthy of the Sichuan Tang Clan in their own style, by using poison. The elders were aghast, misinterpreting his words. They shouted in disbelief, asking if he intended to poison the Sichuan city lord instead of helping him. Soryang was left utterly confused by their reaction. Deep down, Soryang was puzzled as he believed that the Sichuan Tang Clan addressed poison-related matters the following day. The Grand Patriarch announced that Soryang would now begin training in the Tang Clan's martial art, the 5 Venoms returning technique. Soryang asked if the training would also involve physical exercises. The Grand Patriarch explained that as Soryang practiced martial arts, his body would naturally adapt to align with the techniques. Mu Soryang further clarified that the Tang Clan focused on practicality, so Soryang would learn skills that could be immediately applied in real situations. Mu Soryang unpacked an array of weapons, arrows, daggers, shuriken and more. They started with concealed throwable weapons such as needles, coins, darts, powders, daggers and throwing knives. Mu Soryang explained that while there were many unconventional concealed weapons, they could mostly be divided into 5 types. He asked Soryang which one he thought was the easiest to handle. Soryang guessed it was the dagger or throwing knife, which turned out to be correct. Then Mu Soryang inquired about the most difficult weapon. Soryang suggested powder as it needed to be scattered effectively. However, Mu Soryang informed him that the needle was the most challenging. Surprised, Soryang assumed it was because the needle was small and thin, making it tricky to throw. Mu Soryang explained further, it wasn't just about the difficulty of throwing. Soryang would also need to remember exactly where he threw each needle. To demonstrate, Mu Soryang separated the head of a brush from its handle and made a quick motion. Suddenly, the brush's bristles floated in the air and transformed into needles, raining down and embedding themselves into the ground. Soryang was stunned by how the bristles acted like actual needles. Mu Soryang revealed this was part of the Tang Clan's hidden weapon technique called sky-obscuring flower rain, a secret art where hundreds or thousands of needles fall like flower petals, covering an area. In Soryang's mind, it seemed like the technique involved scattering needles everywhere and then fighting on the same turf. He expressed concern that with an area filled with such needles, there would hardly be any space to move. Mu Soryang laughed and confirmed his assumption, adding that Soryang would have to remember the needles' positions to avoid falling victim to his own technique. To Soryang this seemed almost unbelievable. He broke into a sweat as he confirmed with Mu Soryang that he would need to remember the positions of needles that deflected opponents as well as those that missed their mark. Mu Soryang affirmed this, informing him that with the 5 Venom's body, he'd need to memorize at least 100 positions just to begin. Soryang turned pale at the thought. Afterward, Soryang collapsed face first onto the ground. Lady Huayan arrived wearing a beekeeping suit and asked if she looked ready. She explained that she had heard he was planning to catch a hornet and wondered if the suit was unnecessary. Soryang assured her it wasn't, her suit would allow them to catch one themselves instead of waiting for it to come. Huayan asked if he knew where the hornet's nest was, and he replied that she'd understand once they arrived. Huayan informed him she had spotted a nest nearby, so they headed out together. As they walked, Huayan brought up the letter sent to the Sichuan city lord and asked if Soryang had read it. Soryang confirmed he had. Blushing, Huayan expressed concern that he might not fully understand the letter's contents due to his young age. Soryang responded confidently, remarking that yang qi, a man's vital energy, was indeed important. Embarrassed, Huayan quickly told him that was enough, but it was clear he already understood. The great issue troubling the Sichuan city lord, as Soryang revealed, was erectile dysfunction. His rod was no longer functioning. Huayan grew suspicious of Soryang's knowledge on the subject, given his age. Soryang brushed it off, explaining he had lived alone for some time. Embarrassed, Huayan quickened her pace. A few hours later they arrived at the forest. Soryang became distracted by the creatures there, and Huayan had to keep him focused until they reached their destination. The nest was located inside a small cave-like hollow, which seemed like an ideal spot for hornets. As they approached, Huayan asked what it meant to find a hive without bees. They put on their headgear as Soryang explained that while they were looking for hornets, they wouldn't be capturing any bees. Huayan was confused but followed his lead. They reached the hole, and Soryang explained that the venomous insect they sought was more likely to be found in smaller, weaker hives. Huayan hadn't known this but was relieved to see that the hive seemed to contain what they needed. An insect emerged from the hive, and with a swift movement, Soryang caught it using chopsticks. They hadn't come there to catch a hornet. The insect they were after was something else entirely. That tiny creature would solve the Sichuan city lord's problems. Huayan asked about the bug, wondering if it was a ground beetle. She guessed correctly. Soryang realized that in this world, the insect was indeed called a ground beetle. In the Central Plains, the bug found in the giant hornet's nest was known as a ground beetle, though in the modern world, it's referred to as a blister beetle. Huayan asked if it was normal for ground beetles to be found in a hornet nest. Soryang explained that their life cycle was quite unique. Blister beetles have an unusual method of reproduction. Unlike most insects that either guard their eggs or create a safe space for them to hatch, this little creature simply lays its eggs wherever it pleases. Soryang joked about how the blister beetle would tell its boss to hold on while it dropped some eggs before leaving, with no particular care about the location. It would just lay them anywhere, with the only consideration being to pile them in one spot. When the blister beetle larvae hatch, they start crawling toward the highest point nearby. Once they reach the top, they engage in an odd behavior. They cluster together and mimic a flower. This false flower then attracts bees, which mistake it for the real thing. When the bees approach, the larvae swarm onto a carpenter bee's body, taking over its home in an instant. Soryang wasn't sure why the larvae favored giant hornet nests, but it seemed to be the ideal environment for their growth. Huayan felt sorry for the giant hornets, but Soryang shrugged, saying there was nothing that could be done. Huayan knew that the bug caused burns on the skin and had heard that eating too much of it could even be deadly. Soryang confirmed this, explaining that the orange liquid released by a blister beetle contains cantharidin, a toxic substance that causes burns and blisters when it touches the skin. Huayan blushed and asked if it truly had such an effect. Soryang affirmed, adding that it also had the curious property of immediately raising a man's rod. Embarrassed, Huayan quickly told him to stop explaining. She encouraged him to return to the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Soryang, however, wanted to catch a few more beetles. They had already secured the blister beetle, and once back at the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, Soryang began teaching the warriors how to prepare the medicine. He instructed them to listen carefully and explained that they needed to dry the ground beetles and grind them into powder. 1/10 of that powder was toxic and 3 mo of it could prove fatal. If a person consumed 3/10 of a mo per guan body weight, about half of them would die. Soryang requested that they prepare the medicine using only 1/10 of 1 mo of the poison, about the amount in 10 drops of liquid. To clarify, 1 mo equals 3.75 milligrams, and 1 guan equals 3.75 kilograms. He asked if they understood. Deep down, Soryang felt as if his brain might explode from the complexity. One warrior, removing his mask, remarked that Soryang's explanations were incredibly detailed. They never imagined he would be so skilled in mathematics. The warrior assured Soryang that they would make sure to succeed no matter what. Soryang thanked them, saying he relied on their efforts. Later that evening, Musong was talking to Huayan about how surreal it was that ground beetles had such effects. He mentioned that this made him want to reconsider the poisons in the Tang clan's arsenal. Huayan agreed. Musong then brought up Soryang's remarkable talent in math. Huayan shared how Soryang had calculated the solution's concentration and estimated it to match the weight of 10 drops of liquid. Musong admitted that while he considered himself knowledgeable about poisons, Soryang was on an entirely different level. The more he learned about him, the more he realized what a gem the young man was. Teasing Huayan, Musong asked if she liked Soryang even more now. Huayan blushed, feeling flustered. She admitted that she regretted her hasty judgment in the beginning. Musong replied that as long as she made up for it going forward, that was what mattered. Musong then asked how they planned to test the medicine once it was ready. Huayan turned bright red, almost as if she were a tomato. She mentioned that the branch family elders were saying Soryang had been too insolent. Soryang responded confidently that he'd test it by confronting the clan elders directly. Musong was left speechless, his jaw hanging open in shock. He laughed loudly, finding the boy amusing. The next day, everyone gathered in the hall. The clan elders were doubtful. A warrior handed Soryang a wooden box and explained that he had mixed licorice powder and honey to make the medicine sweeter and easier to consume. Soryang was impressed by how much attention the man had paid to the smallest details. He asked the warrior if he had followed the instructions exactly. The warrior confirmed that he had done so carefully. Other clan members scoffed, saying they were making too big a deal out of it. They even questioned how amazing it could truly be. The patriarch silenced them and then asked Soryang how he planned to prove the medicine's effectiveness. Soryang feigned surprise at the question. The clan elders shouted that it was only natural they needed confirmation. One elder yelled that they would never dare send unverified poison to the city lord of Sichuan. Another elder agreed, adding that if something went wrong it could lead to disaster. Soryang calmly responded that they had no other choice. The warrior understood, but the elders were confused. They grew irritated, feeling as though Soryang was implying they should test it themselves. A loud elder snapped at Soryang, asking if he even understood what that substance was. Another elder commented that Soryang had been out in the world for so long that it seemed like even his insides had turned black. Soryang grinned and called for his grandfather. Museong appeared, asking what he needed. Soryang brought up Museong's earlier statement that those who mastered the Tang clan's martial arts were never afraid of poison. Museong agreed with Soryang's plan and confirmed the statement. Soryang pointed out that the elders' reaction seemed to imply they were afraid. Museong agreed once more. Soryang taunted the great elders of a clan that was surely skilled in mastering 100 poisons. He used reverse psychology, saying that surely they weren't afraid of something as simple as ground beetle poison. This provoked the elder, who then split the medicine into two. He claimed they had no fear of such a trivial poison and consumed it. The elder warned Soryang that if the medicine didn't work, there would be consequences. The elder declared that they would uphold the laws and principles of the clan. They chewed the medicine and a tense silence followed. Then they smirked and declared that nothing was happening. However, one elder felt his manhood stir. The long slumber of the snake was over. Embarrassed, the elders quickly tried to hide their reactions, and from that day on, the clan's laws and principles were firmly set, with a hint of humor. The medicine was sent to the city lord of Sichuan, and its effects were proven to be excellent. A little later, the elders walked through the hall, holding their pants to hide the evidence. Soryang told Museong it had worked just as he had said. By provoking the elders with something related to poison, they had fallen for it immediately. Museong knew that the elders' actions were driven by their pride, but also by their concern for the clan. He advised Soryang not to resent them too much. Museong reminded him that, in the end, they were all family. Soryang nodded, understanding. Huayan hurried in, saying something terrible had happened. They asked what it was, and she explained that their children were acting strange. Soryang turned red and was taken aback. Museong, now serious, called for his grandson-in-law and grabbed him by the collar. He demanded to know what was going on and asked why they had children. Soryang was drenched in cold sweat. Still holding on, he said they hadn't even had a wedding ceremony yet. Huayan, her face flushing, shouted that they weren't human children. It was the centipede Soryang was raising. Soryang looked surprised and worried, quickly asking what had actually happened to the centipedes. He explained that he had been doing a lot of physical training lately and had asked Miss Huayan to look after them in the meantime. However, due to her recent efforts, she had completely forgotten about them. Suddenly concerned, he asked to see where his daughters were, but Huayan told him they weren't with her. The old man, witnessing this scene, was left in utter shock. Sometime later, the three small centipedes were shown looking sickly. Not understanding the situation, Soryang asked Huayan if it had happened suddenly. She confirmed, saying they had seemed fine earlier and asked if he thought they were ill. Their colors looked pale and their shells appeared strange. Soryang quickly realized what was happening and reassured Huayan not to worry. He explained that the process was called molting, during which creatures like centipedes shed their hard shells. He added that it was likely the time for it to happen. Huayan, still uncertain, asked if it was truly okay, and Soryang reassured her it was natural and would happen soon. The first centipede started moving within its shell and moments later, it broke out, revealing something unexpectedly adorable. Everyone was amazed at what they had just witnessed, and Huayan noticed the other two centipedes were also starting to crack their shells. Seconds later they emerged as well. Now gathered together, all three appeared twice as large and even more charming, leaving everyone captivated by their beauty. Huayan asked Soryang if he had names for them yet, but he admitted he hadn't thought about it. After a brief pause, he suggested calling them number 1, number 2, and number 3. Without hesitation, Huayan rejected the idea, saying such generic names wouldn't do. She explained that centipedes of this species could transform into dragons after living for 1,000 years and deserved names worthy of such grandeur. Soryang, skeptical, dismissed the notion that a centipede could become a dragon, even after a millennium. The old man nervously interrupted, laughing, and explained that these centipedes were known as heavenly dragons, meaning they would indeed transform. Realizing who had been spreading such nonsense, Soryang shook his head but continued thinking of suitable names. After a moment of contemplation, he proposed Nova, Myra, and Grace. Huayin was taken aback. Soryang explained the symbolism behind each name. The first, Nova, represented a beginning. The second, Myra, symbolized fragrance. The third, Grace, stood for elegance or kindness. Huayin was charmed by the names and their meanings, agreeing that the father should indeed name his children. Sometime later, while strolling through the city, the now larger centipedes clung to Soryang's body again. As he sat down to rest, he noticed that although his training had strengthened him, it wasn't enough for their increased weight, but at least he could still move. Opening his mouth to comment on their added heaviness, one of the centipedes suddenly jumped and hit him square in the face. Now lying flat from the impact, he realized they were clinging to his entire body. As he mulled over the situation, he overheard a conversation nearby that caught his attention. Two men, carrying a bag of money, remarked on how extravagant the Tang Clan of Sichuan was, planning to visit a brothel that night. They added that earning money had never been easier, sparking Soryang's curiosity. Later, the patriarch shared good news with Soryang. He asked if Soryang remembered the medicine they had sent to the elders some time ago. Soryang confirmed he did. The patriarch explained that the medicine had worked exceptionally well, mentioning that the Lord had sent a message of gratitude along with a generous reward, which delighted both Soryang and Huayin. The father-in-law praised Soryang for achieving something remarkable, admitting he hadn't expected to reap benefits so quickly from accepting him as a son-in-law. Soryang was pleased by the compliment. Finally, the patriarch suggested granting him one of his elixirs, urging him not to refuse out of modesty. Soryang pondered the benefits an elixir might bring. Excited, Huayin asked her father what type of elixir he was offering. He replied that it was the honey of the golden king bee. Soryang assumed it was just ordinary honey, but thought he should probably accept it since it might boost his internal energy and help him become a martial master. With a serious expression, Huayin called out her father, asking why he had mentioned giving a reward when in reality, it was just honey. Gripping Soryang's arm, she sternly said her father shouldn't be so stingy, emphasizing that Soryang's accomplishments weren't trivial. She also pointed out that the honey was a low-grade elixir. The patriarch, now looking downcast, explained that even though it was low-grade, it had been expensive to acquire. Huayin, visibly fuming, retorted that regardless of its cost, it was far too insignificant compared to what Soryang had achieved. The patriarch silently lamented how difficult it was to have a daughter. Unbothered by the argument, Soryang asked more about the golden king bee they were discussing. After a moment of thought, the father-in-law described the golden king bee as a venomous, mid-level creature found in forests. He explained that its size was comparable to that of a small dog. He added that consuming its honey provided internal energy equivalent to 2 full months of meditation. Soryang's eyes lit up, marveling at the idea of a bee as large as a dog. Meanwhile, Huayin excused herself, frustrated on Soryang's behalf. Thinking quickly, the father-in-law fabricated an excuse, saying he thought Soryang might enjoy seeing the golden king bee in person. The suggestion instantly lifted Soryang's mood, and he grew excited at the prospect of seeing the bee for himself. The father-in-law gave an approving nod, and Soryang became euphoric. He recalled how in his past life he used to harvest honey alone while filming videos for YouTube. Wasting no time, he ran off, proclaiming himself an expert on bees. The father-in-law followed, commenting that this had turned out to be a good idea. Huayin sighed deeply, realizing she would have to deal with this new situation. Thus began the journey to harvest the honey. Despite their advanced knowledge, when they arrived, they found two groups arguing over who had the right to collect the honey from that area. One group claimed they had purchased the information fairly, while the other argued that they had arrived first and had also bought the details from a man with messy hair and a large wart on his face. Soryang recalled having seen someone with those exact features before. One of the members of the Tang Clan of Sichuan grew furious and shouted that those swindlers had insulted their clan. Upon hearing the name Tang Clan, the entire opposing group was struck with fear. Moments earlier, the patriarch had gathered with the couple, warning Soryang to be cautious on his first journey outside. He reminded him not to forget that he was now a member of the Tang Clan family. Soryang nodded, saying he understood. Huayin, already aware of the topic, remained silent, while Soryang, surprised, glanced to the side and noticed a group of Tang Clan members awaiting leadership. The patriarch explained that Soryang now needed to learn how to manage others. Soryang protested that Huayin would be with him, but the patriarch called him foolish, stating that now that she was his wife, it made him the highest authority. Stunned and confused, Soryang froze when the patriarch referred to Huayin as his wife. Meanwhile, in the background, Huayin reassured him that he would do just fine. Desperate, Soryang promised to do his best. Returning to the current scene, tension filled the air as the two groups glared at each other, vying for the right to harvest the golden king bee's honey. Soryang asked Wolfgang, the leader of the Venomous blood unit, if they should share information with the other group. After a moment's thought, Wolfgang questioned who had dared to leak information about the Tang Clan of Sichuan. Huayin remarked that whoever had the audacity to sell information bought by the Tang Clan must be very bold. Upon seeing her, the opposing group grew visibly uneasy. Recognizing her as the poison flower of the 3 flowers of Murim and a direct descendant of the Tang Clan, they were struck with fear. Realizing their mistake, the leader of the other group apologized, introducing his faction as the Central Wind Sect and announcing their withdrawal. He insisted they had no intention of interfering in Tang Clan affairs. The other sect members also apologized, vowing to track down the scoundrels who had sold the information. They quickly departed, leaving Soryang amazed and giving him a glimpse of the Tang clan's influence. Naively, Soryang asked if everything was now resolved. However, Wolfgang, with his seasoned experience, responded that it wasn't over yet, explaining that groups with their reputations wouldn't back down so easily. Wolfgang then instructed his men to set up camp nearby and organize shifts for keeping watch, suspecting that the sect members were hiding and waiting for the right moment to strike. He ordered one of his subordinates to gather intelligence on the enemy. Huayin, noticing Soryang's uneasy expression, reassured him with her experience, but Soryang could only think about the honey. The scene shifted to the group observing the Golden King bees from a hidden vantage point. The bees were indeed larger, about the size of small dogs. Soryang was captivated by their appearance, and Huayin admitted it was also her first time seeing such bees. The two noted how adorable the bees looked, with their golden fur making them appear even cuter. This was likely the reason they were called Golden King bees. Soryang observed that their colony seemed quite small but reasoned that, considering their size, it made perfect sense. He explained that a small hive would usually house around 5,000 to 7,000 bees. This information caught Huayin off guard, prompting her to ask how he knew this without even entering the hive. Soryang replied that, based on his experience, he could deduce it simply by observing the number of bees entering and exiting the hive. Suddenly, someone approached them from behind. They turned to find it was the man sent to gather intelligence. He reported that he had located the sect, who had established themselves on the opposite side and appeared calm, likely waiting for the right moment to act. Wolfgang speculated that they were waiting for nightfall to use the Tang clan's technique to harvest the honey. Curious, Soryang asked about the technique. Wolfgang explained that it involved burning artemisia leaves, whose smoke would calm the bees, providing enough time to collect the honey. Soryang found the method ingenious. The scout then made an observation that left everyone tense. The wind was blowing in their direction. In the silence that followed, Soryang had an idea, pointing out that if the wind was blowing toward them, it would also mask their scent. Huayin agreed. Excited, Soryang leapt up, announcing he would make a quick visit to the hive. Huayin, alarmed, grabbed him to prevent him from approaching the venomous mid-level creatures. Holding onto his clothes, Huayin scolded him, while Soryang insisted he would only do it once. Meanwhile, they accidentally struck a stone, which bounced multiple times and landed near the tree that housed the bee colony. This left the pair frozen in terror. Before they could react, the bees poured out of the tree ready to attack. Realizing the danger, Huayin grabbed Soryang by the neck and bolted far away from the scene. After receiving a stern scolding for causing trouble, Soryang sat on a rock, deep in thought. He began pondering if there was another way to approach the situation. Lighting a fire against the wind could trap them between the sect and the hive. Additionally, he noted that these bees were different from the ones he was familiar with. They could detect vibrations from the ground several meters away. While he was lost in thought, someone approached him from behind. It was Huayin, who announced she had brought the children. She explained that they had finished their meal and were wandering off. Soryang thanked her for her concern. In a gentle tone, he asked the children to behave, and they chirped in agreement. Huayin then sat beside him, making Soryang visibly uneasy. She asked if there had been any progress, to which he replied that he needed more time to think and observe. She apologized, admitting she might be pressuring him too much. Clearly overwhelmed, Soryang insisted it was all in her head and assured her he wasn't feeling pressured. At that moment, Huayin noticed two monkeys near the tree, seemingly in a squabble, making quite a racket near the bees. She pointed out that one of the monkeys looked particularly aggressive. Soryang suddenly caught a strange scent and quickly asked Huayin if she could smell it too. She confirmed, noting it was a sweet aroma. Horrified, Soryang explained that the scent was pheromones released by the bees, signaling an imminent swarm. Without hesitation, Huayin grabbed him and leapt away to safety. From a secure distance, she looked back, astonished. A massive swarm of Golden King bees had emerged, attacking the noisy monkeys near the hive. The bees bit relentlessly, leaving the monkeys covered in painful welts. The poor creatures had no chance. Now hidden, Huayin asked Soryang how he knew the bees were going to attack, even before hearing their buzzing. He explained it was the sweet scent the bees had emitted. She remarked that now that he mentioned it, the smell resembled a flower's fragrance. Before she could finish her thought, Soryang interrupted, asking if she could distinguish the pheromones and recognize the scent. She confirmed, identifying it as the scent of magnolia flowers. This revelation brought a smile to Soryang's face. As he prepared to speak further, Huayin blushed, sensing his enthusiasm. With a mischievous grin, Soryang declared that he had found the perfect solution to deal with the meddlesome rebels targeting their bees. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, all the members of the sect were gathered, waiting for the perfect moment to act. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, especially the sect leader, who was quickly becoming drunk. As they roasted fish over a fire, the leader took another swig and remarked how delicious everything was. One of the members, a man with a scar across his face, asked the leader when he thought the Tang clan would move to collect the honey. The leader admitted it was hard to say, noting how 3 days ago the Tang clan was everywhere, but now it had gone completely silent. He speculated that the Tang clan would likely act soon, a notion the scarred man agreed with. The leader then asked if they were certain they could make good money from this, which made everyone burst into laughter. The scarred man explained that candles made from the Golden King bee's wax were treasures exclusively used by the imperial family. He added that the Tang clan would only take the honey and leave the hives behind, leaving them to claim the real prize. Excitement bubbled among the group at the thought of the Tang clan failing their honey collection. Malicious laughter echoed as they imagined not only getting the honey but also the hives. One of the men brought up Huayin, referring to her as the infamous poison master known as the Three Flowers of Murim. He warned the group to keep an eye on her and ensure she didn't die at their hands, at least not yet. This suggestion was met with more wicked laughter as they entertained the thought of claiming Huayin for themselves. with one member suggesting that she might even become a Tang Clan in-law. Another joked that favors like that needed to be returned. As they laughed, one of the henchmen suddenly noticed a strange scent wafting in from afar. Still joking, he suggested it must be the natural perfume of the poisonous flower, wine. Another, chuckling along, bet that even her natural scent was as intoxicating as that aroma. The wind carried the fragrance across the forest, accompanied by an unusual noise. The man who had been joking moments ago now froze in fear and asked the others what the smell was. As they turned their attention to the sky, their expressions changed to shock and terror. Against the backdrop of the moon, a massive, swirling cloud was descending. It was an uncountable swarm of golden king bees. Two members screamed in panic, asking if that was really a swarm of bees, and the others confirmed their worst fears. Without wasting another moment, they all ran for their lives, scrambling to escape the incoming wave of golden king bees. The once adorable bees, with their shining golden eyes, were now on a rampage, attacking anything that moved. Within seconds, the swarm had done its work, leaving the sect members covered in painful welts caused by the bees' bites, just as they had done to the monkeys earlier. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to show the mixture of ingredients Soryang had prepared to produce the pheromone. It had been strategically placed on the ground so the wind could carry the scent toward the henchman's camp. Hidden behind trees and rocks, Soryang and Hwain watched as the bees mobilized, following the pheromone's trail. Hwain was astonished that the plan had actually worked, while the sect leader stood slack-jawed, amazed that the entire swarm was heading in one direction. Hwain turned to Soryang and asked how he had managed it, admitting she hadn't expected the bees to become so aggressive over the scent of flowers. Soryang, clearly excited, explained that the smell had triggered the bees to launch a full-scale attack. Curious, Hwain asked how simply crushing some flowers and fruits and spreading the juice could provoke such a response. Soryang, brimming with enthusiasm, explained that the specific scent acted as a signal for the bees. Using examples like the Giga Chad beetle and adorable bees, he elaborated that the phenomenon was due to pheromones, a type of chemical signal used by animals of the same species to communicate. He added that social insects like ants and wasps heavily relied on pheromones for tasks such as locating food. Finally, he explained that the pheromone he used was the exact same chemical signal the bees released when initiating a mass attack, isoamyl acetate. Hwain, enchanted by Soryang's explanation, said it was fascinating that he knew the scent emitted by magnolias was the same one bees used to signal an attack. Embarrassed by her praise, Soryang replied that what was truly fascinating was her ability to recognize those scents. She explained that as a descendant of the Tang Clan, which specialized in poisons, she had to be highly sensitive to smells. Shifting focus from their explanations, Soryang noticed no bees were emerging from the hive. He concluded that this was the perfect moment to act and ventured into the Golden King bees' hive to harvest their honey. Holding smoldering mugwort leaves whose smoke soothed the bees, the trio moved cautiously, observing their surroundings. Standing at the entrance to the massive tree, surrounded by the silence of the night, the leader warned of the danger and insisted on going first. As he stepped inside, his eyes widened in amazement, marveling at how much larger the hive was than they had anticipated. Looking upward, they saw enormous golden glowing honeycombs, fully living up to the name Golden King bees. The leader confirmed that the hive appeared empty, with no sounds of bees buzzing around. As they ventured further, Soryang noticed something unusual. After a closer inspection, he realized there was no honey. Hwain, after looking around, confirmed his observation. This struck the leader as odd, noting that such a thing had never happened before. Soryang also observed the absence of eggs in the hive. Curious, the leader asked if this might be related to the lack of honey. Drawing on his expertise, Soryang hypothesized that the bees were preparing to migrate. They must have consumed all their stored honey and carried it in their stomachs for the journey. He suggested this behavior might have been triggered by the frequent presence of humans nearby. Hwain agreed, stating that it made complete sense. Soryang elaborated that when bees prepare to migrate, the queen stops laying eggs because they can no longer care for larvae during their transition. While exploring the tree's interior, Soryang suddenly froze in shock. Hidden and camouflaged among the hive's remains, he spotted a lone golden king bee that had been left behind. With a sly smile, Soryang turned to the leader and asked how long he could sustain his mobility techniques without resting. The leader, confused by the question, estimated he could manage about half a day. Before he could ask why Soryang wanted to know, a scout interrupted, urgently announcing that the golden king bees were returning and they needed to leave immediately. On high alert, the leader ordered everyone to retreat. He told Soryang to abandon his search and get out of the hive. In the background, Soryang continued inspecting the hive until Hwain came to retrieve him. Grabbing him by his clothes, she insisted they leave immediately. They all dashed to safety, knowing that even the Tang Clan's techniques to calm the bees wouldn't be enough to prevent an attack. As Soryang was dragged along, it became apparent that he had taken the golden king bee and hidden it inside his clothes. Moments later, the group finally breathed a sigh of relief, grateful to have narrowly escaped a potential mass attack. Hwain expressed her relief at having made it out before the bees returned, only to pause when she noticed something moving inside Soryang's clothing. Horrified, she demanded to know what he was carrying. With a sheepish smile, Soryang revealed the golden king bee queen and nonchalantly explained that, since they couldn't retrieve the honey, he had brought the one who could produce it. Everyone stood speechless, processing the situation. When the gravity of what he had done sank in, they were thrown into a panic, unsure of what to do next. The golden king bee queen, ever adorable, emitted a soft sound that only emphasized her charm. Soryang, now grinning, turned to the squad leader and warned that the bees would soon realize their queen was missing and start chasing them. As if on cue, a massive swarm of golden king bees, willing to sacrifice themselves for their queen, appeared on the horizon, heading straight for them. With an innocent smile, Soryang cheerfully stated, "We need to run, now." and so began a life-or-death chase. Woolgang carried Soryang on his back, running as fast as his legs would allow. The queen bee was restless, her wings trembling with unease. Soryang gently stroked her head, trying to soothe her, and promised that he would take her to a place where no one could disturb her. It had been several days since their desperate escape from the swarm of honeybees began. During this grueling journey, the group pushed themselves to their limits, sacrificing sleep and using their mobility arts to the fullest. Exhaustion was etched on the faces of every member of the team. By the time they reached their destination, several warriors from the Venom Blood unit had fallen behind. Silently, Soryang vowed that as soon as they returned, he would demand proper mobility arts training for everyone. As they pressed forward, one warrior stumbled and fell to the ground. Alarmed, another member shouted, drawing attention to their fallen comrade. The downed warrior was Huang Duryong of the Venom Blood unit. His condition was critical, half-conscious with dark circles under his eyes, and both drool and snot dripping from his slack mouth. Soryang wasn't faring much better, dark circles shadowing his own eyes. Yet, he clung to the hope that once the queen bee was far enough from her colony, the relentless pursuit of the swarm would cease. Woolgang, however, began to lose faith. He questioned Soryang, asking if they could truly escape. Soryang's answer was vague, offering no definitive assurance. 3 days later, another warrior collapsed, falling face-first onto the dirt path. Weakly apologizing, he admitted he could no longer continue. Soryang grew increasingly worried about Woolgang's condition. Before he could act, Hwine stepped forward, insisting she would carry Soryang in Woolgang's place. Soryang protested, suggesting he could run on his own. Despite her disheveled and exhausted appearance, Hwine declared with unshakable resolve that a member of the Tang clan never gives up. When they finally reached the gates of the Tang clan estate, 2 guards were stationed there. They quickly noticed the approaching figures and immediately recognized Hwine, their young lady. Leaning on Soryang for support, Hwine staggered forward. The guards were stunned by their battered state and wasted no time calling for assistance. The commotion drew the attention of the clan elder and Chai Olsen, who hurried out to see what was happening. Both men froze in shock at the sight of Hwine's weakened condition. Chai Olsen gently placed her head on his lap, using his healing arts to tend to her injuries. Furious, he demanded an explanation from Soryang. Soryang pleaded for calm, explaining that Hwine was merely exhausted from 10 consecutive days of using mobility arts without rest. However, he didn't dwell on explanations and urged them to move immediately to the training grounds, insisting there was no time to waste. The elder, confused, asked for clarification. In response, Soryang reached into his clothing and revealed the golden-haired queen bee. He explained that the swarm would arrive soon and that they needed to prepare at the ancient grove in the training grounds. A heavy silence fell over the room, as everyone struggled to process what they had just heard. Finally, the elder broke the silence, bursting into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. Chai Olsen, however, was less amused. He reminded Soryang that his task was to gather honey, not bring the queen bee herself. With a firm grip, the elder placed his arm around Soryang's shoulders and declared they would head to the training grounds immediately. A startled cry escaped Soryang as the elder effortlessly lifted him and began running at breakneck speed. Midway through, Soryang shouted, alarmed. "What's wrong now?" the elder asked. "The bees, they're coming our way," Soryang exclaimed. The elder turned to see a massive cloud of bees swarming after them. "Did you bring the entire colony with you?" he asked, incredulous. The two quickened their pace, racing toward the ancient grove. Soryang's body strained to endure the overwhelming speed, but the elder's secure grip held him steady, like a living seatbelt. At last they arrived. Soryang approached the tree and gently addressed the golden-haired queen bee, explaining that this was the safe haven he had promised her, a new home where she would be undisturbed. With care, Soryang released the queen bee, asking, "Not bad, right?" The queen bee emitted a soft, melodic sound as if acknowledging his words. She inspected the tree and turned back to Soryang, her excitement evident. Soryang chuckled, asking aloud if she truly liked her new home. The elder, standing nearby, reminded everyone that they needed to leave quickly, as the swarm was still approaching. The members of the Tang clan watched in awe as the golden-haired bee colony arrived, flying in perfect harmony above the tree. The queen bee let out a series of sounds as if calling to her followers. Obediently, the bees settled into the tree. The elder watched in awe, admitting that he had never witnessed anything like it in his entire life. The mission was a resounding success. The golden-haired queen bee had been relocated safely, marking an extraordinary achievement for the Tang clan. Soon after, the adorable bees, each the size of small dogs, could be seen drinking a sugary mixture. Sugar water had been offered to the exhausted golden bees, who had followed the group tirelessly. As the saying goes, bonds are often forged over shared meals, and goodwill begins with a moment of kindness. Fortunately, in this world, a refined sugar substitute existed, working perfectly for the task. Soryang hoped this small feast would help ease the bees' distrust of them. Deep down, he wished for more, for the bees to eventually see him as their master. Suddenly, Soryang shouted, his expression changing as he remembered something. Both Chul-san and the elder turned to him with suspicion, asking what was wrong. Nervously, Soryang asked about Hwine. Irritated, Chul-san retorted that Soryang was only thinking of her now, after everything that had happened. He explained that he had instructed other members to escort Hwine back to her mother so she could rest. Chul-san then asked, clearly annoyed, whether they had really used mobility arts to travel from the forest all the way back to the estate while being followed by the bees. Soryang hesitated, then confirmed with an awkward nod. He apologized, explaining that they had managed only 4 hours of sleep per day, spending the rest of their time running. The elder suddenly seemed to realize something. Turning sharply to Soryang, he asked where the members of the Venom Blood unit were. Sweat beaded on Soryang's forehead as he stammered out a hesitant answer. They had collapsed somewhere along the roadside. Quickly he added that he would go back to retrieve them. Eventually, the members of the Venom Blood Unit returned safely to their families. In Huayan's room, she had recovered enough to sit up and look cheerful. Soryang sat beside her. Excitedly, Huayan remarked that the golden bees had regained their strength. Soryang explained that the bees were now busy gathering nectar from the poisonous flowers on the Tang Clan's mountain. Huayan laughed, commenting on how adorable it was. At that moment, someone burst into the room, calling Soryang's name urgently. It was Pei, insisting that Soryang come quickly. Something seemed wrong with the golden bees. They appeared to be searching for something. Soryang and Huayan rushed outside to find the bees scattered everywhere. As soon as the bees spotted Soryang, they swarmed toward him, clinging to his clothes and tugging at his shirt. Confused, Soryang couldn't make sense of their behavior. The bees tugged harder, lifting him off the ground. Huayan watched in astonishment as Soryang floated in midair, arms outstretched and legs stiff, forming a T-shape. After a moment, the bees set him back down. Still dazed, Soryang asked what was going on and why they were acting so strangely. The bees began nudging him toward the hive and he finally understood. They wanted him to go inside. Looking around, Soryang noticed that the bees had already begun constructing part of their hive and were diligently collecting honey. That's when he saw the queen bee approaching him. Extending his palms, he asked if she needed help climbing up. Before he could react, the other bees grabbed him again, pinning him in place. One even pinched his cheek. Soryang glanced at the queen bee, noting her elegant and surprisingly charming appearance. And then, to his utter shock, the queen bee closed her eyes and leaned toward him. Panic surged through Soryang, but he didn't have time to protest. The queen bee pressed her lips to his. He felt something placed in his mouth and instinctively swallowed. Immediately the other bees released him and the queen bee stepped back. Face blazing red, Soryang shouted at her, utterly mortified. That was my first kiss. What were you thinking? But before he could say more, an intense wave of pain shot through his body. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony. What did you give me? Soryang wondered in his mind. From his perspective, the queen bee watched him with an enigmatic expression, leaving him completely bewildered. Meanwhile, Soryang was lying on the ground, writhing in pain, while the queen bee observed him passively. As he agonized on the ground, he noticed that beneath the strange discomfort, like an intense itch, his entire body was engulfed in overwhelming heat, and his heart was racing uncontrollably. He turned toward the queen bee beside him, still struggling, and demanded to know what she had made him eat. She simply stared at him adorably, offering no response as his senses began to fade and his eyelids grew heavy. A few minutes later, still unconscious, Soryang heard someone calling his name over and over. When he partially opened his eyes, he saw Huayan and the Great Elder. Huayan, frantic, exclaimed that something was seriously wrong with him, and the elder confirmed, saying it seemed he had ingested a highly potent elixir. Soryang fainted again as Huayan pleaded for him to hold on, promising to guide his chi. Moments later, Soryang regained full consciousness. He woke to find Huayan beside him, worry etched across her face as she asked if he was okay. He sat up in bed, scratching his head and asked where they were. She explained they were in the Tang Clan's medical wing. Huayan elaborated, saying that when she saw him being dragged off by the queen bee, she and the elder immediately ran to the hive. By the time they arrived he was already unconscious, so they brought him there. She asked if he remembered what had happened at the hive. Soryang paused to think. It was then that he realized his first kiss in this world had been with the queen bee. Embarrassed, he flushed deeply. Huayan, still concerned, asked if he was feeling alright and if there was anything wrong with his body. She offered to call the Great Elder for his expertise if necessary. Looking down at his hands, Soryang shook his head and said there was no need. After letting out a long sigh, he decided to explain what had really happened. He told her that the queen bee had fed him the same food she eats, which was undoubtedly the cause of everything. Curious, Huayan asked what exactly he had eaten. Soryang admitted he didn't know the exact name but said that if he had to name it, he would call it the king bee elixir. Huayan was shocked. He went on to explain that worker bees collect nectar and pollen for sustenance and that only those dedicated to their labor consume it. Still puzzled, Huayan asked what the queen bee eats. Soryang replied that from birth to death, the queen bee exclusively consumes the elixir made by the worker bees. In other words, he explained, the substance the queen bee had forced him to consume was royal jelly. Huayan understood and remarked that it must be the queen's exclusive food for her entire life. Soryang then added that the king bee elixir has special effects. Intrigued, Huayan asked what those effects might be. Excitedly, Soryang explained that while worker bees typically live for about a month and a half, the queen bee, sustained solely by the elixir, can live up to 690 times longer. Huayan, startled by his enthusiasm, told him to calm down. She concluded that the mystery was solved and there was no reason to worry. She noted that the internal cultivation method he had practiced, the 5 Venoms return technique, was only a beginner-level technique, so he couldn't absorb the elixir's full power. She also mentioned that the honey from the bees carried 2 months' worth of internal energy, but he had essentially absorbed 60 times that amount, equivalent to 10 years of internal energy. She added that he was incredibly lucky. As he felt the surge of blue energy coursing through his body, Soryang realized just how fortunate he had been. Huayan, bashful and fiddling with her hair, hesitantly suggested that he should check himself in a silver mirror later. Blushing, she hinted that the golden king bee elixir might have had other effects. Wide-eyed, Soryang demanded to know what effects she was talking about and what the silver mirror was for. When he looked into the mirror, he noticed something was different. His body was taller, his abs were defined, and even his hair had grown longer. Examining himself further, he realized there was definitely something unusual. He questioned whether royal jelly always had such effects. He noted that his cultivation had improved significantly and that his skin was unbelievably soft, almost like a woman's. Panic set in as he wondered if he was turning into a woman since the substance he had consumed was meant exclusively for the queen. Determined to confirm, he decided there was only one way to check, by analyzing his baseball bat. After a meticulous inspection, he was relieved to find everything intact, or perhaps even slightly enhanced. Relieved, Soryong lay down on the floor and realized everything was where it should be. Hwain mentioned that the elder had guided his chi, otherwise the outcome could have been disastrous. Soryong admitted that he had indeed been at death's door and that the great elder had saved him. Later, as he walked through the city, Soryong noticed he was receiving strange stares that hadn't happened before. He wondered if it was due to the increase in his internal energy. When he overheard two girls talking about him, he decided to slip away quietly. Now at the Sichuan clan's restaurant, Soryong sneaked in trying not to draw attention. However, Hwain's mother noticed him as he arrived while everyone was being served at the table, which was adorned with several beautiful dishes. Her mother teased that her son-in-law looked even more handsome now and asked how he was feeling and if his body was alright. Soryong replied that he was fine and apologized for causing any worry. She told him not to fret and said that it was now something to celebrate. After all, his skin looked amazing and Hwain must be feeling jealous. Embarrassed, Hwain blushed deeply. Flustered, she urged everyone to stop teasing and to take their seats. With everyone gathered around the table, the servants began serving the meal. Hwain's father asked if Soryong was feeling better, to which he replied yes and apologized again for causing concern. Soryong also took the opportunity to thank the elder, saying he had heard how well he had taken care of him. The elder graciously acknowledged the gratitude and commented that Soryong seemed to have had a stroke of good fortune. At this, Hwain's father and the elder turned to Soryong and asked if he could explain what had happened. Hwain had mentioned the King Bee elixir, but they wanted to hear the story directly from him. Soryong paused, reflecting on what had truly happened and how to convey it. He began by explaining that it seemed the Queen Bee had been so pleased with her new home that she decided to reward him for his kindness. She dragged him into the hive and fed him the King Bee elixir, which started all the commotion. Everyone at the table was shocked, marveling that even mid-level venomous creatures could show gratitude. It was truly fascinating. The elder then asked Hwain's father if there was any way to obtain the elixir again, noting how it could greatly benefit the Tang clan. Hwain's father responded that while the honey alone was an incredible treasure, the King Bee elixir would indeed be an extraordinary blessing. Excited by the idea, Hwain's mother turned to Soryong and asked if it would be possible for him to acquire more of the elixir. The question silenced the entire table as everyone waited for his response. Hwain herself addressed him directly, asking if it was truly possible to get more. Soryong thought about it, considering that with ordinary bees, it might be feasible to create multiple queen cells and trick the worker bees into producing royal jelly for them. However, he concluded that attempting such a trick with the highly intelligent king bees would likely result in them turning everyone into a hive. He explained that royal jelly was essentially baby food produced by worker bees, but what he had consumed came directly from the queen herself, raising the possibility that it wasn't even the same substance. Debating whether to be fully honest and risk dashing their hopes, Soryong finally said he didn't think it was possible. The elder and Hwain's mother immediately asked why not. Soryong replied that even if someone could eat it, he wasn't sure they would want to. Confused, Hwain's father asked if the issue was with the taste or the smell. Soryong clarified that it wasn't about either. The king bee elixir came directly from the queen bee's mouth, and the only way to receive it was through direct contact with her. He went on to explain that the process involved forming a bond by joining lips, with the queen's tongue entering the recipient's mouth to transfer the elixir. The entire table froze in shock at the revelation that Soryong had kissed the queen bee, especially with his wife sitting right beside him. Still stunned, Hwain's father concluded that it was best to assume acquiring more was impossible since the queen bee had only favored Soryong, making it unattainable for anyone else. At that moment, the sound of chopsticks dropping broke the silence. It was Hwain, her face serious, who asked Soryong about this so-called kiss. With a look of disbelief, she demanded to know if he had really kissed the queen bee. It seems our young warrior might be in serious trouble now. Meanwhile, night had fallen, and the full moon illuminated an otherwise calm and serene place. In a secluded room, someone appeared visibly irritated. His hand, scarred and veined, rested heavily on the table. This hand belonged to none other than Ju Young-hak, the leader of the Murim Martial Alliance and known as the Emperor of the Fist. Suddenly, from outside the room, a voice announced the arrival of tea. Young-hak allowed the person to enter, and a young woman with brown hair stepped in, carrying a tray with a tea set. She mentioned that she had prepared Seosan Bikro tea, which startled Young-hak, as it was the tea of his homeland. He commented on the coincidence and she smiled, explaining that she was aware of its origins because the tea was famous. Grateful, Young-hak thanked her and promised to savor it. As she poured the tea, he prepared to take a sip, the woman watching him intently. Just as the tea neared his lips, another voice interrupted, identifying itself as General Jiggle Hu. Young-hak asked what brought him there at such an hour and invited him to enter. Jiggle, full of respect, apologized for disturbing the leader's rest and explained that he had received an urgent message from the Sichuan Tang Clan that he believed required immediate attention. Young-hak assured him it was fine and urged Jiggle to share the news, assuming its urgency meant it was important. Jiggle stepped forward, placed a scroll on the table and began explaining the situation. He revealed that the message concerned Rakshasa Blood Hand Tak Anyang. Jiggle detailed how the Tang clan had recovered not only Tak Anyang's head but also the secret manual of the Blood Hand poison art, which had been in his possession. Upon hearing this, Young-hak's rage boiled over, and he slammed his fist onto the table, shattering the teacup the woman had just served. Still trembling with anger over the Blood Hand poison art, he demanded to know where and how the manual had been retrieved. Jiggle explained that years ago, Tak Anyang had disappeared after being struck by the myriad poison's palm of the Divine Elder. Subsequently, he had fled to the Hainan Islands where he lived in seclusion. With a slight smirk, Jiggle added an even more fascinating piece of news, that the infamous demon Tak Anyang had been defeated by a young poison master. This piqued Yonghak's curiosity, and he asked for confirmation, wondering aloud if there truly was a young poison master. Sitting directly across from the leader, Jiggle said the story surrounding this event was quite intriguing and suggested that Yonghak would find it fascinating. Smiling slyly, Jiggle asked permission to recount the tale in full detail. In the background, the woman silently observed Jiggle with an enigmatic expression, clearly displeased by his presence. Elsewhere, in the Grand Hall of the Tang Clan Patriarch, a meeting was underway with the clan's most prominent members. One of the elderly men mentioned that there were individuals within the Tang clan who had sold secrets to outsiders. Another elder called it an audacious betrayal, lamenting that he never imagined anyone would tarnish the clan's reputation. Soryong whispered to Huayin that it was surprising no one criticized her father-in-law, to which she smiled and replied that it was only natural. While the room buzzed with heated discussions, the father-in-law, Tang clan patriarch, spoke up, demanding to know who would dare to disgrace the family's honor. He added that even the elders of collateral branches were furious, emphasizing that, at the end of the day, they were all one family. He informed everyone that he had already requested the Beggars sect to uncover the culprits and expected news soon. Moreover, he announced his intent to personally visit the Yingchuan commandery. One elder asked how he planned to handle the situation. The patriarch responded decisively, explaining that he would begin with the soul-annihilating poison, followed by the bloody flames poison and the intestine-paralyzing venom. He elaborated, describing in vivid detail how the culprits would writhe in agony as their blood boiled, their organs dissolved, and their very souls felt like they were being torn apart. Finally, he would finish them off with the 7-step soul-cutting poison. Hearing this, Soryong was stunned by the sheer brutality of the poison mix. Without hesitation, the patriarch gave orders to Wolfgang to summon the poison annihilation unit immediately, declaring his intention to depart at once. Wolfgang promptly obeyed. Outside, the unit stood assembled, ready for deployment. Turning back towards Soryong, the patriarch said he was leaving and entrusted him with overseeing matters in his absence. Soryong expressed his gratitude and asked his father-in-law to take care of himself. Smiling confidently, the patriarch replied that Soryong need not worry. After all, it was others who should be concerned about his actions. With that, the group departed, and the patriarch addressed the squad, declaring that they would ensure the punishment for those who leaked the information would be unforgettable. Watching them leave, Soryong turned to Huayin and asked if those men belonged to the poison annihilation unit, noting that he had never seen them before. She confirmed, explaining that they were assigned to handle slightly heavier tasks. With a knowing smile, she elaborated that their primary role was to eliminate people, which was why they were aptly called the Annihilation Unit. Soryong couldn't help but wonder what exactly slightly heavier tasks entailed for them. As they continued their conversation, a voice called out to them from behind. Turning around, Soryong saw it was the elderly elders approaching. Both Soryong and Huayin greeted the elders respectfully. One of the elders mentioned they had heard rumors about Soryong's recent stroke of good fortune. Pausing for a moment to think, Soryong realized what they might be referring to and admitted it was true. As he pondered, his thoughts turned to the royal jelly of the Golden King bees. One of the elders coughed awkwardly and, now a bit sheepish, explained that the reason they had approached Soryong was to ask him for a small favor. Surprised, Soryong asked what kind of favor they had in mind. When he inquired if it was related to the Golden King bees, the elders quickly denied it, asking if he thought they would stoop so low as to covet such a thing. After all, they explained, miraculous elixirs and rare treasures naturally find their destined owners. Still puzzled, Soryong asked what, then, they wanted from him. The elders fumbled awkwardly, clearly hesitant to answer directly. One of the elders leaned closer to Soryong, lowering his voice to keep others from hearing, and asked if he remembered the remedy, the earth beetle medicine, that had given them such a boost the other day. Since Soryong had been in charge of it before, he still had authority over the medicine. It was only then that Soryong, now smiling, realized what they were referring to. What sly old men, he thought. With a smirk, he pulled out the earth beetle medicine and began to handle it deftly, almost as if performing a juggling act. Though he was still adjusting to life in the clan, he knew that if the elders supported him in various ways, there would be nothing he couldn't offer in return. The elders burst into laughter, promising that from now on, they would fully support their son-in-law. Huayin, however, felt slightly disappointed. At that moment, the great patriarch emerged from the temple and noticed the elders laughing boisterously. Just as Soryong was about to hand over the earth beetle medicine, the patriarch asked what was causing such merriment. Panicking, the elders scrambled to cover up their intentions, awkwardly beginning to dance, claiming it was just a friendly gathering. The plan worked. The great patriarch believed them, thinking they had finally come to appreciate Soryong's true value. Huayin, however, remained disappointed and quietly furious. Their moment was interrupted when a man rushed in, announcing a serious problem. Everyone turned their attention to him, and the great patriarch demanded to know the issue. The man revealed that Lord Sichuan was on the verge of death. Shock and panic spread throughout the room. Soryong immediately asked if Lord Sichuan had been using the medicine correctly. The man confirmed but explained that after observing its effects, Sichuan had taken a new concubine and consumed more than double the recommended dose. Sweat formed on Soryong's brow as he imagined the potential consequences of such recklessness. The great patriarch, visibly displeased, decided to personally investigate the matter. Since Soryong was the only man left in the household, he was tasked with protecting the women while the patriarch was away. Accepting the responsibility, Soryong bid him farewell and took up the role with determination. The great patriarch departed, leaving Soryong feeling reassured that nothing would go wrong under his watch. Later that evening with nightfall, Soryong and Huayin sat on a bench talking. She asked how he was finding the 10 Venoms dual origin art he had been learning. He replied that it wasn't as difficult to grasp now as it had been at the start. He explained that if the 5 Venoms returning technique felt like a single large sphere moving through the body, the 10 Venoms dual origin art was more akin to a twin-cylinder engine. Hua Yin noted that by this point, Soryong must have already developed some tolerance to common poisons. She added that he could now release his inner energy directly or infuse it into objects. Soryong was speechless, intrigued by this revelation, and overwhelmed with an uncontrollable desire to test his new technique. They prepared a straw dummy for the test. Drawing a dagger, Soryong closed his eyes to focus. A powerful green energy began to emanate from his body, radiating with intensity. The first step was to move his internal energy from left to right and then rotate both spheres in the same direction. As soon as the chi energy circulated through his body, he opened his eyes and hurled the dagger forcefully toward the straw dummy. The dagger flew like lightning, piercing the dummy effortlessly. Soryong was pleased, and his fiancée praised him for successfully infusing his chi into the dagger. The knife, still radiating energy, embedded itself into the wall directly in front of 2 masked men. At first, the masked intruders thought they had been discovered and considered taking Soryong out. However, upon noticing the straw dummy, they realized it was just a coincidence. One of them was holding a book, the secret manual of the blood hand poison art. Although it was merely a copy, their task was complete, and they decided to leave quickly before the situation escalated. They mocked the Tang Clan's negligent security, calling the guards fools for making their escape so easy thanks to the distraction. But then, something unexpected happened. A sweet, rosy aroma began to fill the air, putting the men on edge. The scent was pleasant, yet they couldn't determine its source. Hovering just above them was the king bee, glaring at the intruders with an intensity that confirmed they didn't belong there. As the rain began to fall, cries echoed through the area. Soryong froze, startled and unsure of what was happening. Elsewhere, Hua Yin turned toward the sound of the cries and spotted movement. Through the bushes, she caught sight of men dressed like ninjas. 2 were hidden while 1 stood in plain view. The king bee attacked the man who appeared confused, clearly not understanding why a bee was in the training grounds. Soryong and Hua Yin observed the scene and quickly realized they were dealing with intruders. With a furious expression, Hua Yin knew she had to act. She dashed toward the intruders and instructed Soryong to prepare the bow. She moved so quickly that a trail of dust followed her. Soryong shielded his face with his arms, stunned by her sudden action. He had no idea what she was planning. Meanwhile, the king bee bit the ear of one of the intruders. The man, desperate, tried to grab the bee, tears forming in his eyes as he called for help from his companions. One of the ninjas turned to Soryong and, noticing Hua Yin approaching rapidly, panicked and ordered the others to retreat. The king bee clung to the struggling intruder as the other 2 ninjas leapt away, scattering in different directions. Hua Yin sprinted after them, commanding them to stop. Determined, she pulled out a whip. With all her strength, she lashed it against the ground, causing a small explosion. Fortunately for the intruders, they managed to leap away in time, avoiding the attack. Hua Yin's eyes widened in surprise at their successful evasion. The man being attacked by the king bee unsheathed his sword and charged toward her. The king bee clung to his head in what might have seemed endearing under different circumstances. Soryong panicked, shouting for Lady Hua Yin to be careful. As the king bee sucked on the man's head, he swung his weapon with immense force. To his shock, Hua Yin blocked the attack effortlessly with her whip. She locked her piercing gaze on the man, who barely had time to react before she counterattacked. The next thing he knew, the whip was right in front of his face. The strike caused a small explosion on the man's body, sending the king bee flying away. After neutralizing her opponent, Hua Yin moved gracefully, appearing behind him. The man lost consciousness and collapsed to the ground. Soryong stood there, mouth agape, deeply worried about her. Hua Yin, her expression calm, turned to reassure him, telling him not to worry as she was fine. The man's body began to emit a sinister energy, causing him immense pain. The king bee landed on Soryong's shoulder as he stared at the body, unsure who the man was or whether he was dead. Hua Yin stowed her whip as she observed the strange energy emanating from the man's body. Within seconds he perished. Hua Yin explained that he had bitten into poison to end his own life, undoubtedly to conceal something crucial. Not far away, someone noticed the intruder's presence and shouted to alert the guards. Hua Yin turned and decided to organize a pursuit team to hunt down the fleeing enemies. Soryong began to sweat, overwhelmed by her determination. Hua Yin ordered him to follow her along with Gu Pei, the leader of the blood poison unit. The night was dark, but the forest was lit by the flickering glow of torches. Soryong, Pei and several other members of the clan chased the intruders through the dense forest. Leading the group, Pei was confident that the masked men couldn't have gotten far. With a determined expression, he declared that they must capture them at any cost. While the others seemed tireless, Soryong was already showing signs of exhaustion. Sweating and short of breath, he focused on activating his dual-cylinder engine technique. As he did, he stomped the ground with great force, causing it to shatter beneath him. The earth gave way under his feet, and Soryong let out a loud yell as his body sank into the ground. From his clothing, small centipedes began to crawl out. Pei turned around with a confused expression and asked if Soryong was all right. Soryong had created a large hole in the ground. Pei and the others halted their pursuit, rushing to the edge of the hole to help him. With their assistance, Soryong managed to climb out, thanking them profusely as he genuinely thought he wouldn't survive. But as he turned his head back, something caught his attention. Beneath him was a cluster of green snakes staring up at him intently. Soryong couldn't stop himself from sweating even more as fear gripped him upon realizing he was standing in the middle of a snake nest. Pei studied the serpents carefully and explained that they usually gathered in areas with strong Inkai energy, particularly during this time of year. He added that these snakes were unusually aggressive and warned Soryong to stay vigilant. Soryong, overwhelmed by fear, continued sweating profusely. One of the snakes opened its mouth, preparing to strike. This behavior was odd to him since striped tiger water snakes were typically not this hostile. Dark clouds loomed over the sky, signaling the arrival of a storm. Soryong admitted that it was his fault they were delayed. Knowing that rain was imminent, he suggested they move quickly. Pei and the others agreed, resuming their chase. They couldn't afford to lose sight of the intruders. Not far ahead, a faint light became visible. Pei turned to Soryong, announcing that they had found the intruders. The masked men, visibly furious, found themselves cornered at a dead end. Behind them was a towering rocky mountain, cutting off any escape route. As thunder rumbled across the sky, Pei and his group arrived, encircling the intruders. Pei and his team reached into their robes, declaring that this was the end for the masked men. Soryong remained silent, while on the other side, one of the masked men glared at his companions and commanded them to tighten their formation. The Blood Poison Unit members drew their kunai, prompting the masked men to unsheath their weapons in response. The Blood Poison Unit advanced, ready for combat. One of the masked men wielded a sword and charged forward. Two members of the unit threw kunai at him, but the ninja skillfully deflected the projectiles with his dagger. He counterattacked fiercely, his sword clashing violently with the ninja's daggers. The ninjas were shocked by the man's strength, their expressions hardening in frustration. One of them moved swiftly and delivered a powerful kick to the man's face, forcing him to drop his weapon. They ordered him to step aside. Witnessing this, a member of the Blood Poison Unit panicked. While the ninjas were distracted, something began approaching them rapidly. It was Pei who attempted a surprise attack. But the ninja ducked quickly, evading the strike with ease. Pei stood still, observing silently. The ninja retreated with small leaps, but Pei activated his skill, Triple Mirage Kill, and hurled kunai at the enemy. The kunai flew toward the ninja, exploding mid-air and splitting into 3 separate blades. The ninja was stunned by the unexpected attack. Luckily, he managed to block 2 of the blades, but the third embedded itself in his shoulder, causing excruciating pain. He clutched his wounded shoulder, grimacing. Pei approached, mocking him as a lucky bastard. By now, 2 of the masked ninjas were already down, leaving only one standing, injured and fatigued. Pei and his men began to close in on the last remaining enemy. The ninja was fortunate. The rain had diluted the venom on Pei's kunai, sparing him from a more severe fate. Pei glared furiously at the ninja, but suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed through the air, interrupting the standoff. The voice mocked the pathetic insects gathered there. Pei and the others froze, their confusion apparent. On high alert, Pei adopted a serious expression and demanded to know who was there. At that moment, a figure descended from the top of the rocky mountain, landing before the remaining ninja with enough force to crack the ground. The newcomer was an old man with a long, scraggly beard and a sinister smile. He scanned Soryong and the others with a murderous gaze, exuding an aura of malice. Feeling the man's powerful energy, Pei immediately became alert, recognizing him as a martial arts master. Without hesitation, Pei ordered his men to retreat. The old man's body began to radiate a sinister aura. He stood upright and with a wicked smile, started walking toward them. Turning to the ninja, he asked if they had retrieved the item. The ninja closed his eyes and pulled a book from within his robes, explaining that it was not the original but a copy made by the Tang Clan. This revelation stunned Soryong, whose eyes widened in disbelief. Memories of the great patriarch's words came flooding back to him. He had warned that this book was something only evil men would desire. Soryong's gaze locked onto the book as recognition set in. He quickly realized it was a replica of the malicious tome his grandfather had studied long ago. Meanwhile, one of the captured ninjas had been tied up nearby. Soryong, seated beside Pei, revealed that the book was a copy of the secret manual of the blood-handed venomous art, leaving Pei visibly shocked. Pei's eyes burned with fury and he clenched his teeth tightly. As this was happening, the ninja handed the book to the old man, who opened it with an unsettling grin spreading across his face. Pei's fists trembled with indignation. He couldn't fathom the kind of people who would dare to covet something so dark and cursed. He demanded the old man reveal his identity. With a sinister smirk, the elder began flipping through the pages one by one. As he had suspected, the book was indeed a copy. It contained the forms of the techniques but lacked the crucial formulas. Still, for him this was more than enough. After finishing the book, he shut it decisively. Even though it was early, there was no better way to announce their return. The old man gave the ninja, whom he addressed as Bloody Glory, permission to unleash the cultivation martial arts and ordered him to leave no one alive. Bloody Glory cracked his knuckles and, with a determined expression, vowed to carry out the command. Beside him lay the lifeless body of one of his fallen comrades. Reaching out toward the corpse, he began to concentrate. A crimson energy emerged from his hand and moments later the blood from the body shot toward him, absorbed through the palm of his hand. Pei's eyes widened in terror as he realized what technique the man was using. On the other side, Soryong clutched his head in disbelief, overwhelmed by the horrifying sight. The ninja's eyes started to glow as he smiled and continued absorbing the blood from the corpse. In the blink of an eye, the kunai embedded in his shoulder fell to the ground, and his wound healed completely. The old man erupted into maniacal laughter. He summoned an energy sphere into his hand and, with a malicious glare, declared his identity. He was none other than a senior member of the blood cult, the feared Blood Falcon Daggerclaw, known as Lord Guchenak. Soryong gritted his teeth and drew his kunai. Guchenak's gaze shifted to him, his interest piqued. The old man instantly recognized the vigor in the young warrior's body. Drool began to drip from Guchenak's mouth. He licked his lips, his eyes glinting with excitement, as he murmured that it had been far too long since he'd tasted the pure blood of youth. Lord Guchenak commanded Ninja to capture their target. believing that nothing aids recovery better than the pure blood of a young boy. Without hesitation they pursued their prey. In response, Pai ordered the deployment of the 5 poison annihilation formation, determined to prevent their enemies from reaching Soryang. Amused by their efforts, Lord Guchenak retaliated with a devastating attack, unleashing a powerful explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. In the chaos, Soryang was instructed to evade, but before he could react, a force seized him from behind. Ninja's grip tightened around his neck, immobilizing him as he coldly declared that the elder required his blood. Soryang, struggling to breathe, managed to utter a signal. At his command, baby centipedes emerged, sinking their fangs into Ninja's flesh. The sudden attack caught him off guard, their bites relentless. Before he could recover, a dagger pierced his skull, and his body was consumed by flames. A familiar voice called out to Soryang. Huayin had arrived, accompanied by Wolfgang and an elder. However, their approach came to an abrupt halt as they noticed the 5 poison annihilation formation, leaving them momentarily unsettled. Pai acknowledged Huayin's presence and informed her of the blood cult elder's assault. Without hesitation, Huayin commanded everyone to support Pai. Wolfgang, responding swiftly, instructed his allies to enhance the formation, transforming it into the 9 poison annihilation formation. Encircling the elder, they prepared for battle. Lord Gu, rather than being intimidated, was intrigued. He quickly identified Soryang as the one responsible for defeating Tak and Yang's blood hand poison claw. Dismissing the title as mere exaggeration, he mocked the irony of such a fearsome technique falling victim to centipedes. Wolfgang, unfazed, warned him to stay silent, threatening to bury him alongside the others. Lord Guchenak merely laughed, daring them to try, his expression twisted with anticipation. As the battle raged on, rain poured from the sky, explosions erupting across the battlefield. Amidst the chaos, Soryang attended to an injured warrior, urging him to hold on despite knowing deep down that their situation was dire. Their forces were growing weaker, while their enemy continuously replenished his strength by absorbing blood. A sudden crash broke his thoughts. Huayin had been thrown against a tree, wincing in pain. Rushing to her side, he asked if she was all right. Though coughing up blood, she reassured him before grasping his hand and advising him to return to the Tang clan to summon reinforcements. Their current numbers were insufficient. Soryang hesitated, torn between the truth of her words and the reality that he could do nothing to change the battle's course. Wolfgang and the others pleaded with him to go, vowing to hold their ground as long as possible. With a pained expression, he finally agreed, promising to return quickly, though he doubted his own speed. Before he could dwell on it, Huayin pulled him into an embrace, assuring him that he was capable. She reminded him of his hard training and promised they would search for more poisons together in the future. Entrusting him with their survival, she returned to the battlefield. Watching her leave, Soryang struggled with his emotions, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. Pushing forward, he sprinted as fast as he could, until he tripped, landing in a puddle. The baby centipedes emerged, offering him comfort, a gesture he found oddly touching. Then realization struck. Even if he ran at full speed, it would take nearly half a day to reach the clan, and most of their skilled fighters were away. Even if he called for help, they wouldn't arrive in time. Looking up at the sky, he understood the truth. They had sent him away not for reinforcements but to save him. The thought left him conflicted. Was it because he was the youngest or because they saw him as weak and in need of protection? Doubts crept in about the true nature of martial artist chivalry. Yet, as he recalled Kaelson's words, that he was part of the family, he reflected on the meaning of the word. He had never truly considered himself a member of the Sichuan Tang Clan. But as he recalled cherished memories with them, he realized that everyone had already accepted him as family. Everyone except himself. A small smile formed on his lips. For an assassin clan, they were surprisingly warm-hearted. Rising to his feet, his resolve hardened. With newfound determination, he whispered to himself, ready to act. He sprinted forward, driven by a singular goal, to save those who had risked their lives for him. His mind raced through possible solutions, considering every factor: blood cult regeneration, venomous creatures, poisonous beasts, and lethal herbs. Then he came to a halt. Before him lay a snake den, its eerie inhabitants slithering within. He turned to the baby centipedes, instructing them to wait before carefully setting them down. Without hesitation, he ran toward the den, leaving them puzzled by his actions. With unwavering resolve, he leaped into the pit of serpents, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The blood-stained snakes, known as flower snakes, appeared harmless at first glance, but they were highly venomous vipers. Unlike other venomous snakes with hooked fangs at the front of their mouths, these had smaller venomous fangs located in the molar area, making it more difficult to inject their toxin. However, their venom was among the most potent of any terrestrial snake in East Asia. As Soryang descended into the snake's nest, dozens of them immediately coiled around his body, biting his hands and legs. He remained composed, enduring the pain and even urging them to bite him harder. Though their venom exceeded that of a black mamba in strength, the Tang clan's internal energy techniques allowed him to resist its effects, ensuring his survival for the time being. The small centipedes, watching from a distance, became worried and called out to him. He reassured them, telling them to remain calm as he would be leaving soon. However, as he examined his arm, now covered in snake bites, he decided that he had acquired enough venom for his purposes. Just as he prepared to leave, he suddenly found himself unable to move. Looking down, he saw that the snakes had wrapped tightly around his legs. The unexpected situation unsettled him, and panic flickered across his expression. Before he could react further, the small centipedes leaped into the nest, landing on his head and shoulders. Their presence caught him by surprise, and their actions, though unexpected, struck him as oddly endearing. One of the centipedes, enraged by the snake's aggression, let out a tiny but fierce roar. Soryang watched with growing confusion as the confrontation escalated. A snake locked eyes with the centipede and began to hiss, provoking the small creature further. Its patience quickly ran out. With sudden intensity, the centipede lunged at the snake, biting it before slamming its body against the ground with surprising force. Soryang could only watch in disbelief. The tiny creature then turned its attention to another snake, continuing to fight with unexpected ferocity. Within moments, it had defeated its opponent, its eyes gleaming with triumph as it flashed a satisfied smile. With most of the snakes now deterred, Soryang crouched down, realizing that the centipedes had intervened out of concern for him. He gently patted the head of the victorious centipede, his expression softening. The small creature climbed onto his head and, seemingly exhausted, fell asleep. With a quiet smile, Soryang prepared to leave, knowing he still had something important to do. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Hwayin was exhausted, but her determination remained unwavering. Many members of the clan had already fallen, and those who remained surrounded Gutchinak, who showed no signs of slowing down. He grabbed another warrior by the neck, draining his blood to restore his energy. Foam formed at the victim's mouth as his life was drained away. Gutchinak's eyes gleamed with twisted delight as he mocked his opponents, claiming their struggle was meaningless. Though weary, Hwayin refused to retreat. She drew her whip, prepared to fight to the very end, all while hoping that Soryang had managed to escape safely. She instructed the remaining warriors to keep Gutchinak in their sights while maintaining as much distance as possible. Noting that the rain was about to stop, she ordered a signal to be sent to any nearby reinforcements. A warrior nodded in response, though Gutchinak merely smirked. An elder stepped forward, urging Hwayin to leave with Soryang. His words took her by surprise, but she rejected the suggestion without hesitation. The clan members quickly voiced their disagreement, adamant that a direct descendant of the Tang clan could not abandon them. If they failed to protect her, they would be unable to face the patriarch. Gutchinak remained silent at first, watching their exchange with growing impatience. Eventually he crossed his arms and interrupted. He stated that their discussion had gone on long enough. His gaze flickered between Hwayin and the elder before he coldly declared that if his entertainment fled, he would be left bored. A sinister smile spread across his face as he placed a hand on his chin. Then, with a chilling certainty, he revealed his intentions. If Hwayin attempted to escape, he would turn the Tang clan into a spectacle of suffering, a declaration of the blood cult's return. The elder clenched his teeth, recognizing that Gutchinak had no intention of letting anyone escape. Hwayin, resolute, prepared to fight, vowing to take at least one of his arms, even at the cost of their lives. The determination of the clan members was evident as they fixed their gaze on Gutchinak, who responded with a knowing smile. However, just as the tension reached its peak, an unexpected voice interrupted, reinforcing the belief that a member of the Tang clan never abandoned their own. The revelation left everyone in shock. Hwayin's eyes widened in disbelief as Soryang emerged, approaching with a confident stride. The elder was at a loss for words, while Hwayin, though relieved to see him, could not shake off her concern. Without hesitation, Soryang carefully removed the small centipedes from his body and instructed them to stay behind. Declaring his unwavering loyalty to the Tang clan, he removed his shirt, his eyes burning with determination. With no intention of retreating, he prepared for battle, drawing his weapons before charging directly at Gutchinak. Seeing Soryang's reckless advance, Hwayin's worry deepened, but Gutchinak simply welcomed the confrontation with amusement. He had previously spared Soryang's life, and now the young warrior had willingly returned. To him this was sheer foolishness. Without much effort, Gutchinak seized Soryang by the neck, his eyes gleaming with cruel delight. With his grip tightening, he placed a hand on Soryang's abdomen, eager to taste his blood. Despite the pain, Soryang reacted swiftly, blocking the attack with his arm. However, Gutchinak, reveling in his control, began to absorb Soryang's blood through his arm instead, causing an agonizing sensation to overtake him. Panic spread through Hwayin and Pai as they witnessed the scene. Without hesitation, Hwayin commanded the others to assist Soryang, but before anyone could reach him, Gutchinak exerted his power. With a forceful stomp, he unleashed the blood-filled wave technique, shattering the ground beneath him and repelling all who approached. Pai and the others were thrown back, crashing violently onto the ground. Fortunately, Hwayin managed to react in time, catching Soryang as he lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Gutchinak, now feeling invigorated, smirked in satisfaction. The hidden weapons thrown at him had been bothersome, but thanks to Soryang, he had dealt with them all at once. Hwayin, filled with desperation, held Soryang close, attempting to wake him. Observing the situation, Gutchinak decided to grant Soryang a swift and painless death. However, as Hwayin refused to accept this fate, Soryang suddenly coughed, slowly regaining consciousness. His awakening startled Gutchinak, whose expression twisted into one of confusion and horror. Drool dripped from Gutchinak's mouth as he demanded an explanation. His hair began to fall like scattered leaves, his youthful vigor fading as his body rapidly aged. A growing fear overtook him as he realized the cause, a potent energy-dissipating poison. Strength drained from him and his limbs trembled as the truth set in. This should have been impossible. The cult's internal energy techniques were designed to resist such poisons. Panic consumed him. He clutched his face, unable to comprehend how this had happened. The reality of his weakening body was undeniable, and he demanded to know Soryang's true identity. But Soryang, now recovering, merely smiled. With deliberate calm, he pointed at Gutchinak and declared himself his natural enemy. Hwayin, witnessing Soryang's resilience, finally felt a wave of relief wash over her. As the poison continued to take effect, Gutchinak trembled with fear, unable to accept his defeat at the hands of a mere child. Soryang, drained of energy, used the last of his strength to direct a weary gaze toward Hwayin, revealing something that left her in shock. Gutchinak's eyes burned with rage as he fixed his gaze on Soryang. His body tensed with frustration, sweat forming on his brow as he realized that the blood he had absorbed from Soryang no longer obeyed his will. Panic set in as he struggled to comprehend what had been done to him. Determined to seize control, Gutchinak took a step forward, convinced that his domination through the blood cult was imminent. Overcome with madness, he lunged toward Soryang, refusing to fall at such a crucial moment. In a fit of rage, he charged ahead with the intent to kill. Sensing the danger, Hwayin tightened her grip on her whip, immediately preparing for battle. As Gutchinak neared his target, she struck, wrapping the whip around his neck, causing him immense pain. Stunned that her attack had landed, she watched as Gutchinak, a formidable dark martial artist, struggled against the weapon's hold. His fury intensified as he fought to break free, his body convulsing with rage. His mind raced, unable to comprehend how his blood arts had failed him. Enraged beyond reason, he launched himself forward once more, determined to destroy them all, declaring the return of the blood cult. Hwayin, alarmed by his relentless pursuit, clenched the whip tighter. With a fierce determination, she acted swiftly, severing Gutchinak's head in a single decisive motion. His lifeless body collapsed as his severed head landed nearby. The sight filled P with confusion at first, but as realization dawned, a victorious smile spread across his face. With Gutchinak defeated, the elder of the clan rushed towards Soryang and Hwayin, concerned for their well-being. The members of the clan erupted in celebration, their leader having vanquished the elder of the blood cult. Hwayin, still processing the events, turned to Soryang, questioning how he had managed to weaken such a powerful enemy. When he addressed her in a way that caught her off guard, a blush of embarrassment crept onto her face. Despite his weakened state, Soryang maintained a smile, but the toll of the battle was evident. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and sweat dripped from his forehead. As he spoke of needing to be bitten by a tiger-striped water snake to counteract the poison, Hwayin grew frantic, unable to make sense of his request. His face had turned pale, prompting her to recall that such snakes carried no venom. Without hesitation, she commanded the clan members to retrieve an antidote. Hours later, Soryang regained consciousness, his body still weak. Confusion filled his mind as he found himself in an unfamiliar place. The Great Patriarch, observing him closely, advised him to remain still. Hwayin, also present, noted his condition with a mix of relief and concern. Soryang lay face down, unable to move, his confusion deepening as he questioned his predicament. The Great Patriarch channeled his energy into Soryang's back, aiding his recovery. As he learned that 10 days had passed since he collapsed, Soryang was left in shock. Hwayin, with a grateful expression, acknowledged that his actions had allowed her to defeat their formidable foe. She explained how his condition had been dire, and without the timely return of the Great Patriarch, the situation would have been disastrous. The memory of being bitten by a snake in his past life resurfaced in Soryang's mind, sending a shiver of fear through him. With the treatment complete, the Great Patriarch assured him that he would recover. With Hwayin's help, Soryang managed to sit up and expressed his deep gratitude. The Great Patriarch then studied him carefully before deciding it was time to discuss something important. Placing his hands on Soryang's shoulders, he questioned whether the tiger-striped water snake truly possessed venom and sought to understand how Soryang had managed to defeat the elder of the blood cult. As Hwayin grew anxious and urged her grandfather to remain calm, Soryang, still feeling the lingering effects of the poison, prepared to explain everything. With a calm expression, Soryang raised 2 fingers and explained that the tiger-striped water snake possessed 2 types of venom, one located in its mouth and the other produced by venom glands at the back of its neck. Hwayin and the Great Patriarch, seated near his bed, listened with growing curiosity, as this was information previously unknown to them. Soryang continued, stating that these snakes were naturally shy and typically avoided humans, and their fangs were too small to be easily noticed. In fact, it was not until the 1980s that people discovered their venomous nature. The Great Patriarch, quick-witted as ever, immediately connected this revelation to the dissipation of the elder of the blood cult's internal energy. However, he hesitated, recalling that the blood cult had long been known for its resistance to toxins. Soryang, turning toward him, clarified that while it was only a hypothesis, he believed that the elder's energy loss had resulted from exposure to the snake's venom. He elaborated that the primary component of the venom was hemotoxin, a hemorrhagic toxin capable of destroying red blood cells, blood vessel linings and tissue cells. He then posed a crucial question. What would happen if cultists who relied on blood for their martial arts were exposed to such a substance? The success of his plan became evident. Resting his hand under his chin, Soryang speculated that the cultists' blood, the very core of their strength, had likely been altered, leading to their downfall. He also revealed that although little known, the tiger-striped water snake's venom was 5 times more potent than that of a viper. If enhanced with Yin energy, it became a lethal weapon. Upon hearing this, the Great Patriarch's eyes widened in shock, and a cold sweat formed on his brow. The realization that such a powerful venomous creature resided near Sichuan left him deeply unsettled. Hwayin turned to Soryang with admiration, a smile forming as she acknowledged his incredible achievement. The Great Patriarch then cleared his throat, drawing their attention. Crossing his arms, he recalled that the elder of the blood cult had referred to Soryang as the nemesis of heaven, his natural enemy. The title made Soryang uneasy as it sounded overly dramatic, almost like something from a high school fantasy. Embarrassed, he pulled the blanket over his face, looked away and blushed. Witnessing his reaction, Hwayin and her grandfather placed reassuring hands on his shoulders, affirming that the title was fitting given how he had managed to seal the elder's martial arts completely. The Great Patriarch's expression then shifted to one of gratitude as he sincerely thanked Soryang for protecting his family. However, his gratitude soon turned into anger as he clenched his fist, unable to comprehend how the blood cult had dared to attack in his absence. With gritted teeth, he vowed to eradicate them entirely. Both Soryang and Hwayin remained silent, their expression serious. The Great Patriarch insisted that the blood cult must be completely destroyed, a sentiment Soryang fully agreed with. Now that their weakness had been discovered, the next step was to gather a significant quantity of venom from the tiger-striped water snakes. A fiery determination filled Soryang's eyes as he recalled Guchenak and his subordinates, viewing them as nothing more than pests that needed to be exterminated. Since the reappearance of the blood cult, the Tang clan had been in a state of emergency. Many warriors had been wounded and some had lost their lives. A message was tied to the leg of a messenger pigeon, which was then released into the sky. The Great Patriarch had sent it, summoning Murim's allied orthodox factions to the Tang clan to assist in the upcoming battle. Despite the minimal casualties considering they had faced an enemy at the pinnacle of martial arts, the Great Patriarch's expression darkened at the thought of the blood cult plunging Murim into chaos once more. The cult had never been satisfied with merely abducting victims to drain their blood. 30 years prior, they had carried out a massacre that cemented their status as sworn enemies of Murim. The severity of the situation weighed heavily on him. While Soryang remained lost in thought, the Great Patriarch placed a firm hand on his shoulder, pulling him back to the present. A confident glint appeared in the elder's eyes as he stated that this time, the situation was different. Soryang's curiosity was piqued and he turned to listen. The Great Patriarch then revealed the reason behind his confidence. The Sichuan Tang Clan was now the natural enemy of the blood cult. Hearing this, Soryang's expression twisted in frustration, sweat forming on his brow as he struggled to determine whether his grandfather had said this intentionally. The Great Patriarch turned to Soryang with a knowing smile, confirming his suspicions. Placing his hands behind his back, he spoke of a request, asking if Soryang would be capable of fulfilling it. With curiosity, Soryang immediately agreed, especially if it concerned the clan, vowing to do his best. The Patriarch's expression grew serious as he revealed that members of the Murim alliance would soon arrive, including their military forces. He had decided to present them with the poison that Soryang had discovered, now that the blood cult's weakness had finally been uncovered. Soryang's eyes widened in surprise before he respectfully clasped his hands and, with a smile, expressed his agreement, believing it was for the greater good. Seeing this, the Great Patriarch smiled, having anticipated Soryang's response. Just as Soryang was about to leave, the Patriarch mentioned something that would bring him great joy. Curious, Soryang turned back, eager to hear the news. With a warm smile, the Patriarch announced that the modifications to the Hall of 10,000 Poisons had been completed and that, from that moment forward, Soryang would be officially responsible for managing it. A surge of joy overtook him, and he clenched his fists in excitement, already envisioning himself surrounded by poisonous creatures. His eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. The Patriarch also added that, as per Soryang's suggestion, a sunlit pavilion had been prepared, a crucial step for properly raising tiger-striped water snakes. Interlacing his fingers, Soryang grew even more excited, determined to think of this as a duty for Murim's benefit and to give his best effort. As the messenger pigeon soared into the distance, hours passed before Soryang finally arrived at the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Upon seeing it, his jaw dropped in amazement. It was magnificent, guarded by 2 sentries at the entrance. Walking toward the door alongside Hwayin, he noticed a particular room labeled the Toxic Creature Garden. Hwayin's attention immediately fixated on it, and confusion flickered across her expression. Crossing his arms, Soryang smiled as he explained that it was a space dedicated to gathering all the poisonous creatures of the Central Plains. Her expression tensed with apprehension as she questioned whether he truly intended to assemble them all. With unwavering confidence, he affirmed it, reminding her of his promise to one day collect the 10 great venomous creatures of the region. Upon hearing this, a deep blush spread across her face. She covered her mouth, averted her gaze, and without hesitation, rushed off with the excuse of investigating a nearby gathering. As Soryang stood there, momentarily puzzled, a familiar voice greeted him with enthusiasm. It was Gu Pei who stood confidently with his hands on his waist. With a beaming smile, he revealed his new position as commander of the Poison Division. While Soryang's expression turned to one of confusion, Hwayin remained motionless, observing the scene. Gu Pei, still smiling, explained that the division had been newly established under the Patriarch's orders. Behind him, several clan members stood in formation. Turning toward them, Gu Pei formally introduced them, stating that from that moment on, they would serve Soryang, acting as his hands and feet. Whether it involved locating poisonous creatures or raising them, he could rely on them completely. The realization of what was happening struck Soryang all at once. His mouth practically began to water at the thought, while Hwayin, standing nearby, felt a twinge of envy. His eyes sparkled with sheer joy as he processed the significance of the moment. This was like having an entire team from a pet store dedicated to supporting him. For Soryang, this was another step toward turning his dream into reality. Meanwhile, far from the Tang clan, the messenger pigeon reached its intended destination. A woman with long black hair received the message and carefully read its contents. As her eyes scanned the words, she came to a chilling realization: the blood cult had returned. Lifting her gaze toward the sky, she understood that the peace that once reigned over the Central Plains was about to be shattered. A violent storm was looming on the horizon. At dawn the following day, Jaegal and his men set out toward the Tang clan. As they traveled, one of the elders turned to the group with a smile, remarking that they would soon arrive and would likely spend the night at the Tang clan mansion. A sense of relief spread across Jaegal's face at the thought of avoiding another night outdoors. As he walked, his mind wandered to an image of Jeong-hak, the Emperor of the Fist and leader of the Murim Alliance, his fist clenched and his eyes burning with rage. The thought made Jaegal uneasy, realizing the importance of bringing at least one valuable piece of news. His focus remained on the search for any trace of the blood cult. After some time, the group reached the entrance of the Tang clan, where 2 armed guards stood watch. Seeing the mansion in the distance, the elder could not hide his joy. One of the guards quickly took notice of the approaching visitors, his eyes widening in recognition. He assumed that they must be the honored guests from the Murim Alliance. With a composed expression, Jae-gal stepped forward, closed his fan, and formally introduced himself as the military advisor of the alliance. In response, one of the guards opened the gates, while the other greeted them respectfully and expressed gratitude for their visit, requesting that they wait a moment. However, there was a hint of nervousness in the guard's eyes. Glancing to the side, the guard hesitated before explaining that there were certain matters the visitors needed to be aware of before entering the mansion. Jae-gal's eyes narrowed with curiosity, while the elder, more direct in his concerns, asked whether they were required to surrender their weapons before proceeding. The guard, appearing slightly embarrassed, brought a hand to his chin before revealing that, no matter how small or insignificant a creature might seem, it was strictly forbidden to take a life within the Tang clan. At this, Jae-gal's expression shifted to one of surprise, and his mind conjured the image of a golden Buddha statue. The possibility of the entire Tang clan converting to Buddhism crossed his mind. Sensing the misunderstanding, the guard quickly reassured them that they would understand once inside but emphasized the importance of abiding by this rule. Upon hearing this, Jae-gal and the elder became solemn. Before they could discuss the matter further, a familiar presence approached. The newcomer was visibly pleased by the arrival of the military advisor. Jae-gal's eyes widened slightly in recognition before a smile formed on his face. The ones greeting him were Hwayin and Soryang. They both bowed their heads respectfully, and Jae-gal returned the gesture, acknowledging that it had been some time since he last saw Hwayin. She placed her hands over her abdomen and, with a measured tone, noted that exactly 1 year had passed since their last meeting. With a light-hearted smile, Jae-gal inquired about the whereabouts of the myriad poison's divine sovereign. In response, Hwayin closed her eyes briefly before explaining that her grandfather had left to search for traces of the blood cult, offering her apologies for any inconvenience. Jae-gal regarded her with a calm expression, dismissing any notion that it was an inconvenience. Instead, his attention soon shifted toward Soryang, his curiosity piqued. Studying the young warrior, he asked about his identity. With a polite smile, Soryang introduced himself, expressing his honor in meeting the military advisor. At this, Jae-gal and the elder exchanged glances, a hint of confusion in their eyes as they observed that the young man was not from the Tang clan. Before either could voice their thoughts, Hwayin placed a hand over her chest, averted her gaze and hesitated before revealing that Soryang was her fiancé. A stunned silence followed. Jae-gal and the elder stood frozen in shock, while the men accompanying them reacted with disbelief. Whispers of jealousy spread among the group as realization dawned upon them. One of Murim's 3 flowers had a lover. Their hearts filled with despair as they clenched their fists, their eyes shimmering with unshed tears. To them, the world had never seemed more unfair. None could understand how or where Soryang had come from, and envy seeped into Jae-gal's expression as well. With a composed demeanor, he slowly unfolded his fan and lowered his gaze. He requested that they be guided inside, knowing that if the mood continued, the entire group might challenge Soryang to a sparring match. Just as tension simmered, an unfamiliar sound echoed through the air. Jae-gal and the elder instinctively tensed, their expressions shifting from confusion to intrigue as they searched for the source of the strange noise. The men were left in shock, their jaws dropping as they lifted their gaze to the sky. Their expressions of astonishment quickly drew the attention of everyone around them, revealing that something unusual had appeared above. The source of the strange sound was soon identified, the golden-haired king bees which were flying in the area. The sight of such highly venomous creatures within the Tang clan left the group in disbelief. Instinctively, several men moved in front of Hwayin, drawing their swords and instructing the others to remain cautious. Their stance made it clear that they were prepared to protect her at all costs. Observing their reaction, Soryang became increasingly alarmed. A sense of urgency flashed in his eyes as he urged them to put away their weapons. Fear crept into his expression as he stepped forward, placing a hand on one of the men's shoulders in an attempt to explain the new regulations of the Tang clan. However, the warrior, overwhelmed by anger, shoved Soryang's hand aside and with a furious glare, demanded that he step away. He made it clear that the golden-haired king bees were incredibly dangerous creatures, capable of killing an ordinary person with ease. Despite Soryang's efforts to calm the situation, the men continued pressing in on him, gradually suffocating him beneath their collective weight. Unable to suppress his frustration any longer, he forcefully pushed them back. His eyes burned with intensity as he declared that he had been raising the golden-haired king bees himself, urging everyone to remain calm. The revelation left the group in shock. One of the bees landed gently on Soryang's head, an affectionate gesture that only deepened their disbelief. Jae-gal and the others, overwhelmed by fear, instinctively stepped back. Unfazed, Soryang smiled as he played with the bees, fully aware that they had missed him after their time apart. Seeing this, Hwayin's expression softened, and a joyful smile appeared on her face. Meanwhile, the bees turned their attention toward Jae-gal and his men, who were still struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Soryang, maintaining his calm demeanor, stroked one of the bees and gently reassured them not to sting the guests. One of the warriors, watching in stunned silence, broke into a nervous sweat upon realizing that Soryang was treating these lethal creatures as if they were harmless pets. Gradually, the tension in the group dissipated, and the young warriors regained their composure. With the situation now under control, Jae-gal and the elder accompanied Soryang and Hwayin inside. As they walked, Jae-gal's thoughts remained fixated on Soryang. It was difficult to believe that this young warrior from Hanan Island had become the fiancé of the renowned poisonous flower. The realization that an outsider had managed to secure such a position within the Tang clan left him in a state of disbelief. As they strolled further, something caught Jae-gal's attention. Nearby, 2 men were sitting and engaged in a heated argument. The black-haired man, his expression fierce, held up a small vase and insisted that a venomous scorpion would be a more fitting companion for the Tang clan. In response, the orange-haired man, equally enraged, produced a small chameleon and vehemently argued its superiority, directing everyone's attention to the creature's radiant crest. Jaegal's pulse quickened as unease settled over him. Placing a hand on Soryang's shoulder, he hesitated before asking why so many warriors within the Tang clan were preoccupied with insects and animals. Pulled from his thoughts, Soryang turned his attention back to the scene, his curiosity piqued. As the men continued their dispute, he casually explained that they were enduring the venomous creature companionship punishment. The response sent a chill through Jaegal, who instinctively began to sweat. The thought of such a punishment unsettled him, and he quickly inquired about what they had done to deserve it. Soryang placed a hand under his chin, deep in thought, before recalling the events from a few nights prior. That evening, Soryang and Hwayin had gone to the training hall. As Soryang trained, Hwayin became increasingly anxious and advised him to focus on expelling his internal energy. However, despite his best efforts, Soryang's movements resembled a dance rather than proper training. Just as they continued, an unexpected presence disrupted them. Commander Gu and his men arrived, their faces tense. As they stood before them, they closed their eyes momentarily, visibly nervous. With a sorrowful expression, Gu Pei offered his apologies, explaining that a significant problem had arisen. More than half of the captured rat pups intended to feed the tiger-striped water snakes had perished. Hearing this, Soryang turned toward him, his gaze filled with sadness. Hwayin, on the other hand, appeared confused, uncertain about the situation. Soryang crossed his arms, closed his eyes and sighed. There was little that could be done, as rats were highly sensitive creatures. If the environment became too noisy, it was not uncommon for the mother to kill them. However, Gu Pei soon revealed the true cause of the problem. The warriors had not merely failed to preserve the rat pups, they had eaten them. A flicker of disbelief crossed Soryang's face as confusion settled in. Gu Pei continued, explaining that the men had consumed the young rats as snacks while drinking alcohol. The weight of this revelation left Soryang speechless. His eyes widened in shock, struggling to comprehend that the warriors had treated the rats as nothing more than side dishes to accompany their drinks. Soryang was overwhelmed by confusion, struggling to grasp the situation unfolding before him. Hwayin, arms crossed, turned her gaze toward Gu Pei and clarified the meaning of 3 screeches, a dish in which live baby rats were dipped in sauce and eaten. Embarrassment washed over Gu Pei as he lowered his head once more and apologized. Soryang, paralyzed by disbelief, attempted to make sense of what he had just heard. Hwayin stepped forward and scolded them, prompting Gu Pei to clutch his ears as he explained the reasoning behind their actions. Some of the poison handlers were from Henan, and reminiscing about home had led to an unexpected turn of events, resulting in the warriors consuming the baby rats that had originally been captured to feed the tiger-striped water snakes. Soryang's expression darkened with contempt as the full realization set in. Anger surged within him, and he understood that measures needed to be taken to ensure they learned the true value of the creatures they raised. It was through this incident that the Tang clan of Sichuan established the venomous creature companionship punishment and implemented a new set of rules. Back in the present, Soryang stood with his arms crossed, his gaze unwavering as he explained that each warrior was now responsible for raising a venomous creature. The warriors began to argue among themselves, their reactions varying, while Jaegal, unable to contain his unease, broke into a nervous sweat. The reason behind each warrior's association with a venomous creature had finally become clear to him. His curiosity intensified, and he focused his attention on Soryang, finding him increasingly fascinating. As Soryang observed the warriors with thinly veiled disdain, Jaegal came to a sudden realization. This young man was far from ordinary. When night fell, the great patriarch arrived, and the 3 of them sat together at a table for discussion. With a serious demeanor, the great patriarch recounted the series of events that had transpired. Jaegal, closing his eyes momentarily, smiled and remarked that Soryang must be the enigmatic young warrior whom the patriarch of the Tang clan had encountered on Henan Island. The great patriarch studied him for a moment before smiling and inquiring about his thoughts on the Tang clan's most treasured possession. Jaegal expressed his admiration for Soryang, remarking that the term enigmatic hardly did him justice. He acknowledged the astonishing nature of the golden-haired king bees, further reinforcing his intrigue. Soryang, however, could not suppress a sense of nervousness at being the subject of such praise. Jaegal's expression shifted to one of grave seriousness. His mind lingered on a troubling matter, the complete lack of any clues regarding the blood cult. The great patriarch, his composure steady, turned toward Soryang with a knowing smile. He declared that they could not afford to remain passive while the influence of the blood cult continued to spread unchecked. Soryang's curiosity was piqued, and he directed his full attention to the patriarch. Without hesitation, the elder instructed him to retrieve something. Jaegal, taken aback, felt his confusion deepen as his curiosity reached its peak. The great patriarch raised a finger and, summoning his power, formed a protective barrier around them. His eyes closed briefly as he explained that no sound could be allowed to escape, and for that reason he had invoked a Kai barrier. As Soryang reached into his clothing, Jaegal turned his attention to the shimmering barrier, his jaw tightening in astonishment. With unwavering confidence, Soryang produced a small jar and placed it on the table. Jaegal immediately seized it, scrutinizing the object while his mind raced with questions. The mere presence of the Kai barrier suggested the jar contained something of great importance. Unable to hold back his curiosity, he questioned what kind of item required such extreme secrecy. The great patriarch, maintaining his steady gaze, revealed that the jar contained a poison capable of dissipating internal energy. Jaegal, unimpressed at first, argued that such poisons were fairly common and did not seem to warrant the use of a Kai barrier. However, as Soryang and the patriarch exchanged knowing glances and nodded with subtle smiles, the revelation came. This particular poison had a unique property: it exclusively affected members of the blood cult. Jagel's expression shifted instantly. His focus locked onto the jar and his eyes widened in shock. Panic surged through him as he slammed his hand against the table, demanding confirmation. The great patriarch, eyes closed in calm certainty, affirmed the truth of the claim. A deep, burning hatred flickered in Jagel's gaze as his thoughts turned to the blood cult. The significance of this discovery could not be overstated. He recalled the brutal rebellion of 30 years prior, when their fiercest battles had been met with devastating setbacks. The realization dawned upon him: the blood cult had survived the onslaught not because of their superior strength alone, but because the internal energy-dissipating poison had been entirely ineffective against them. The great patriarch, reflecting on the past, confirmed Jagel's suspicions. When martial artists like themselves were poisoned, their internal energy dispersed, rendering them powerless. However, the members of the blood cult had remained completely unaffected. Jagel, maintaining a serious gaze, inquired about the potency of this particular version of the poison. The great patriarch's expression radiated confidence as he explained that, according to Huayin, the poison was capable of reducing the physical abilities of its target to that of an ordinary person. He further revealed that she had successfully defeated a blood cult elder who had been poisoned, striking him down with a single blow. Upon hearing this, a smile spread across Jagel's face, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The revelation confirmed that the poison's effect was reminiscent of the internal energy-dissipating poison used in the past. Acknowledging the significance of such a discovery, he offered a gesture of respect to the great patriarch and expressed his gratitude. With a weapon like this, even the leader of the alliance could find some relief. The great patriarch, however, redirected the recognition toward Soryong, explaining that the true credit belonged to him. It was Soryong who had made this discovery, having willingly poisoned himself to bait the blood cult elder into absorbing his blood. The consequences had been severe. He had lingered at the brink of life and death for nearly 10 days. Jagel's admiration deepened as he processed the extent of Soryong's sacrifice, recognizing both his wisdom and bravery. Soryong, caught off guard, instinctively touched his neck, his face flushing with embarrassment. Jagel, moved by the young warrior's actions, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. With a grateful expression, he declared that if Soryong had any wish, he need only voice it, and he would personally ensure that the leader of the alliance granted it. A smile played on his lips as he awaited an answer. Soryong lowered his head, deep in thought, his fingers grazing his chin. After a moment of hesitation, he finally spoke, his expression betraying a hint of nervousness. Instead of requesting martial manuals, rare elixirs, or treasures of gold and silver, he asked if it would be possible to obtain information about toxic creatures. Jagel's confusion was immediate. His eyes narrowed as he struggled to comprehend why Soryong, given such an opportunity, would prioritize knowledge of venomous creatures over invaluable martial resources. A bead of sweat formed as he tried to make sense of the young warrior's unconventional request. Observing this, the great patriarch let out a hearty laugh. Jagel, closing his eyes, came to a realization. Soryong was truly unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Even within the long history of Murim, such eccentricity was unprecedented. When he reopened his eyes, a knowing smile formed on his face. Though he admitted that he might not have precisely the information Soryong sought, he presented an alternative. He inquired whether Soryong would be interested in a mystical stone lizard.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.